Cultfigga TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution, and the U.S. has removed the veil. You know, they removed the peaceful or partisan veil that they used to wear. Now everybody knows they sided with Hitler and the Fourth Reich. Be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Subscribe to the platform. I got to get straight into the United States siding with the Azov Battalion. Everybody know they're the Nazis that held Hitler. They love Hitler. Their ancestors love Hitler. Well, the USA it's time to arm them. We won't be fooled. They've been arming them. But now it's going to be out in the public. The Congressional Black Coons. See, I'm not going to let them get away with this. Salute, family. We're not going to let the Congressional Black Coons get away with taking our tax dollars to arm neo-Nazis who say they doing this for the white race. They want to make sure the white race rule forever. That's what the Azov Battalion is saying. The Congressional Black Coons need to make it plain. How the hell did you become these type of house niggas? Now let's look into this information.
Also on fine print at this hour, the U.S. has now decided to supply weapons to Ukraine's Azov unit. This decision is seen as part of the broader Western strategy to empower Ukraine, including allowing Kyiv to strike Russian targets.
Now, why is the U.S. now saying openly they're going to supply weapons to Azov, which is neo-Nazis? All of them have Nazi tattoos. I done ran so much content on that. All of them hail Hitler and love Hitler and don't like none of us and want us to go back to the days of slavery or worse. The reason that they are saying this openly is to motivate the Azov Battalion. Remember, I have proven this. The Azov Battalion is the crack force. Those the ground forces. Those the ones who really go where everybody else is scared to go. Why? Because they hate the Russians and they want to kill Russians like their ancestors. And now they're getting advanced weapons to do it. This is disgusting. And I said this at the beginning of this war, if the Nazis did win, if the Azov Battalion won, if Ukraine won, then what? Then what? What about us? You see, the U.S. is, we're going to protect y'all from them. They got me fucked up.
With Western-supplied weapons and considering the deployment of French trainers inside Ukraine. Our next report explains why this move is being viewed by Russia as a provocative escalation.
Peace alert. Here's the rocket. Russia not going to go for it. Hold on. I just wanted to set that piece so y'all could see that newspaper. That news station letting y'all know the U.S. has decided to arm the neo-Nazis. Now we're going to go deeper. Now we're going to go deeper in on that. I might even have to move that Nazi out the title because they really don't want us to talk about that type of shit. I might just have to go back and say the Azov Battalion and remove it.
Well, it's official. The United States has lifted its ban on the transfer of American weapons to the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion in Ukraine. Today, Azov is led by Denis Prokopenko, a recipient of the Hero of Ukraine Award from interim Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a figure he once refused to salute. Prior to becoming its commander, Prokopenko was featured on the front cover of Azov's magazine called Black Sun, after the Nazi sun and red symbol. Prokopenko is a longtime member of Azov, but before he joined the group, he was a member of the Ukrainian soccer ultra gang called the White Boys Club. According to a friend and former Azov member, before joining the Nazi brigade, the two had traveled almost the entirety of Ukraine to support their team.
Now, when understanding this, never fall for all of them not Nazis, because if you understood about World War II, all of the German army wasn't Nazis. All of the German army wasn't racist. All of the German army didn't even like Hitler or the Nazis. But the most powerful fighting force in the German army were the Nazis. And they proved it. Because the radical views and ideas, they wanted to die and fight for a reason, you see? So, right now, they knew these radicals are the most dangerous. Revolutionary salute, brother. These radicals right here, they willing to nuke Russia. But they're also willing to take over the world, like they said, for the white race. That's what's disgusting to me. They doing what they doing on behalf of the white race, and it's in their guidelines and bylaws. You see?
Here's the White Boys Club celebrating Prokopenko's award. I went to the White Boys Club's YouTube channel to see what they're all about. 100% white, reads their banner from this 2017 video. Well, I guess that answers that. Before Prokopenko took command, Azov was led and founded by Andrei Beletsky, a longtime neo-Nazi activist. Today, Beletsky leads an Azov detachment called the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade. Beletsky is perhaps best known for his infamous quote, wherein he pledges to lead the white races of the world in the final crusade against the Semite-led...
Now, that's very important. There's the leader, the founder of Azov, in their founding documents, the guidelines, everybody got to read to get in. They are fighting on behalf of the white race. Now, that's strange. We're not white. No, y'all not white. Some of y'all are white. You're not bigots and racist and you don't like the Nazis. Why the hell are they taking our money? And this is a big scandal. I've been preaching about this forever. Why is our hard-earned B1 tax dollars going to people who say they don't give a shit about us? They are superior to us. We need to kneel to them. And they finna conquer on behalf of the white race. Why the hell are these people getting our money? See, this is a big time scandal. They're getting the money because they're willing to fight the Russians. That's why.
He is perhaps best known for his infamous quote, wherein he pledges to lead the white races of the world in the final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. But you don't have to look very far to find just as equally disturbing remarks. Beletsky was a key figure in the neo-Nazi Patriot of Ukraine group. During one meeting, he raved, "How can we describe our enemies, the authorities and the oligarchs? Do they have anything in common? Yes, they have one thing in common. They are Jews, or behind them, their real masters, Jews." While in prison for allegedly ordering a murder, Beletsky's writings were published in an essay collection entitled The Word of the White Leader. I quote, "Ukraine is the light of Europe. Our nation still has enough strength to withstand this influx of foreigners, to cleanse our land, and to light the fire of purification throughout Europe. Ukrainian social nationalism considers the Ukrainian nation to be a blood racial community. Race is everything for nation building. Race is the basis on which the superstructure grows in the form of national culture, which..."
Race is everything to them. Race is everything to them. They can't stand your kind, not them. Oh, no, not the ones doing the real fight in Ukraine. Huh, please. After they get through with Putin, they definitely don't deal with you. If they could ever get past Putin, your ass gonna really pay. Because you got it too good over here. Remember, right now, Ukraine is the biggest draw for white supremacists all over the world. They go into Ukraine to get combat skills so they can go back to their countries and terrorize. Plenty of U.S. white boys done been, the Feds been dealing with them because they don't want to blow no stuff over here. We done seen, plenty of them been going over there. Imagine a Buffalo mass shooter who killed our people in Buffalo, New York. I reported on that. Guess who his heroes was? Wait for it. These guys with their black son. He held them. He loved them. He had their manifesto. He wanted to be just like them.
Which again comes from the racial nature of the people and not from language, religion, economy, etc. On Telegram, Azov celebrated the U.S. lifting the ban against them using American weapons. Receiving weapons and training from the U.S. will not only increase the combat capabilities of Azov, but most importantly, will contribute to the preservation of lives and health of the personnel of the brigade. This is a new page in the history of our unit. Azov is becoming even more powerful, even more professional, and even more dangerous for the occupiers. The policy change is a far cry from less than 5 years ago, when 40 members of the House of Representatives urged the State Department to classify the group as a terrorist organization. Since 2018, Azov has been banned from receiving training and assistance from the United States because of its neo-Nazi ideology.
Now, they were banned openly, but they've been getting the weapons. What they did was they told the Azov Battalion to disband. So they came up with all kind of different names. The right sector. When Russia just crushed them in their latest, what was called, their offensive, Russia crushed them. They was the 3rd Assault Brigade. I tracked them down. It was the same neo-Nazis, you see. So when they said, okay, we're not Azov, we 3rd Army Brigade. Oh, okay, the 3rd Army Brigade can get all this stuff. Same radical white supremacists. Now they're saying, fuck it. Let them fight under the Azov name. That's really going to piss Putin off. And it goes to show them we're backing them. Because they don't, remember, over the last month, we've been showing these people been refusing to fight. Now the U.S. saying, no, we're going to give you F-16s and give you the biggest advanced weapons you ever could get. Imagine that. Hitler's descendants got better weapons than he had, all thanks to the U.S. They knew who these people was. But because, just like in World War II, but because they hate Russia so much, and this the only game in town to fight the Russians, they helping them. Okay. But we should be pissed as a people. These people hate our guts. And I told y'all, the Azov Battalion, the real fighting force of Ukraine, say they fighting on behalf of the white race. That should piss off all of y'all, because all y'all tax dollars, y'all sit there think I'm playing that 60 billion. If y'all go to work and punch the clock, nigga, and you got the government taking out your check, nigga, you just gave money to these bastards, nigga.
As a main force fighting Russia, today, the State Department sees no problem. In a statement, the U.S. State Department declared that Azov had passed.
Why wouldn't? And I say this to my white Americans. I know a bunch of them. Why would they feel in fear of somebody who say they fighting on behalf of the white race and they're white? Why would they? When somebody said a white man is superior. Come on, you see the game that been played on us? That's disgusting. Them coons put us in a bad position because their white buddies telling them in Congress, you're going to be okay. No, they're just going to get it. Putin, we got this on. They said that in World War II. You better know history. Repeat. They said that in World War II as they sat back and did not fight the Germans. Russia was destroying them. Then they jumped in at the end because they think Russia was going to take the whole pie. So right now they're telling all blacks in America, don't worry. It's okay. They're going to stop after they defeat Putin. Yes, they don't like you and wish your ass was in slavery. Yes, we're going to take your money, but you're protected by us. That's another protection scam they run on us. They're going to be protecting us from the Azov Battalion if they ever did defeat the Russians.
Leahy vetting, which is used by the United States to prevent groups that have carried out war crimes from receiving weapons and training. Yet evidence is not so hard to find. During the showdown in Mariupol between Russian forces and the Azov Battalion, videos purporting to show Azov executing fleeing civilians and using civilian infrastructure for covers were not hard to come by. These are war crimes according to the Geneva Convention. While Ukraine and NATO have blamed Russia for bombing a theater in Mariupol that was holding civilians at the time, Russia has accused Azov of staging a false flag. Azov soldiers were in and around the building in the days leading up to the bombing. In fact, the Azov Battalion was publishing footage from inside the building just days prior. Following Russia's takeover of the city, civilians testified to Russian media in droves about the Azov Battalion's use of civilians as human shields. Meanwhile, a number of captured Azov fighters have been found guilty of war crimes in Russian courts. Over the years, everybody from the United Nations to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe have documented war crimes by Azov. Yet, despite the previous ban, Azov has already been armed and trained by the United States. It's documented. Let me show you. One article from 2019 in the Daily Beast begins, "There are no doubts about the neo-Nazi and white supremacist backgrounds of the Azov Battalion, a militia that has positioned itself at the forefront of the fight against Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine." Mm-hmm. In an interview with the outlets,
but they tell you Trump racist, and they look. The Democrat hustle is they fighting against hate. They would not tolerate injustice, and they are arming a group who say they fighting on behalf of the white race. You gotta make this shit make sense. I keep telling you that. Trump didn't want to arm these people. He said, hell no, them lunatics. Biden, he sees no problem with that. He's the descendant of a slave owner. Biden is like, I know how to handle these guys. They some good old boys from back in the day. This is disgusting, man.
Sergeant Ivan Kharkiv of the Azov Battalion talks about his battalion's experience with U.S. trainers and U.S. volunteers quite fondly, even mentioning U.S. volunteers and engineers and medics that are currently assisting them. A similar interview was published in the American-funded propaganda outlet Radio Svoboda in 2018. It's with none other than Azov commander Denis Prokopenko, identified by his call sign Radis. Radis tells about the history of the appearance of all Azov officers. 4 instructors from the United States and Canada taught. 2 of them are veterans of the war in Vietnam. They were 74 and 66 years old. They fought in Vietnam as ordinary soldiers. They then held command and staff positions in NATO structures in Iraq, Afghanistan. Of course, in the USA, it's designed for 1 year. Here it was shortened to 2.5 months. The entire team of Azov, 44 people, were gathered here. There was a lot of material in English that they did not have time to translate. There were Russian, Ukrainian, Georgian languages. But they managed, especially since in Azov there are many officers with fluent English. There was a military translator. Only 2 officers failed the exams and left the course. Then, after finishing the course with new knowledge, we went to the training ground for combat adjustment. Then the war in the format wall-to-wall and crowd-to-crowd ended, and we understood that we urgently need to turn non-military people into military ones. And then we chose NATO standards, from symbols, map design, personnel structures of units, to tactical structures and techniques. And we got a serious head start. If you know, the armed forces and the National Guard have just now decided that it's necessary to switch to the NATO system. Meanwhile, photographs published by Azov in 2017 show its members meeting with American military instructors. That same year, Azov published more photos of its members using American-made grenade launchers. Here, I'd caution against the potential for blowback. Arming and training a neo-Nazi group in Ukraine could have serious repercussions for the West. The only thing, though, is that it already has. Let's rewind to November 2022, when Italian police busted a neo-Nazi cell which included members of Azov. Members of the group reportedly maintained, quote, direct and frequent contacts over Telegram with not just the Azov Battalion, but also of the neo-Nazi Ukrainian military formations Right Sector and Centuria, quote, probably in the view of possible recruitment into the ranks of these fighting groups, according to Italian media. One of the arrested members, Giampiero Testa, was reportedly, quote, dangerously close to far-right Ukrainian nationalist groups and was planning an attack on a police station. Italian police were unable to capture another member of the cell as he was in Ukraine fighting with the Azov Battalion. Authorities say the fighter, Anton Radomski, planned to attack a shopping mall in Naples. Earlier that year, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security noted in an internal document that, quote, Ukrainian national groups, including the Azov movement, are actively recruiting racially or ethnically motivated violent extremist white supremacists to join various neo-Nazi volunteer battalions in the war against.
Hundreds of them have left the United States to go fight over there. U.S. backs it. They love it. They praising it on the news. They don't want to tell you why, though, because they want to fight on behalf of the white race. But the white supremacists over here are going to get much needed military training, which is disgusting because they're going to be able to come over here and 2-3 man teams destroy, kill a bunch of people, blow up shopping malls, do a bunch of disgusting ass shit. They're getting all the training over there, but they're getting it because they're white supremacists and they want to do it on behalf of the white race. And Joe Biden and the U.S. government and the congressional black coons have now said, fuck it. We don't care as long as they fight Putin. We don't care.
Against Russia. That same document notes one key American intelligence gap, asking, what kind of training are foreign fighters receiving in Ukraine that they could possibly proliferate in U.S.-based militia and white nationalist groups? If we rewind even further, we can find even more direct links between the Azov Battalion and American neo-Nazi groups that have carried out violent attacks on anti-racist protesters on American soil. For example, members of the neo-Nazi Rise Above movement, or RAM, were arrested for carrying out unprovoked attacks on journalists and protesters in the United States, ranging from California to Charlottesville, Virginia, during the infamous Unite the Right rally in 2017. In 2018, they traveled to Germany, Ukraine, and Italy to celebrate Adolf Hitler's birthday, according to the criminal complaint against them. According to FBI Special Agent Scott Beersworth, the RAM members met with Olena Semeniaka, the leader of the International Department for the National Cause, which is a political party in Ukraine that was founded in 2016 out of a regiment of the Ukrainian military called the Azov Battalion. Based on my experience and training, I know that the Azov Battalion is a paramilitary unit of the Ukrainian National Guard, which is known for its association with neo-Nazi ideology and the use of Nazi symbolism, and which is believed to have participated in training and radicalizing United States-based white supremacy organizations. In an interview with the U.S. government's Radio Free Europe, Semenyenko said that the RAM members, quote, came to learn our ways and, quote, showed an interest in learning how to create youth forces in the ways Azov has. The Rise Above movement's founder, Rob Rundo, was arrested in Romania last year. You can see the Nazi Sonnenrad tattoo on his elbow. During the trip to Ukraine, Rundo boxed with an Azov fighter in a highly publicized event. Rundo has said that his idea for RAM came from Ukraine's far-right scene. This was always my whole inspiration for everything, he told a right-wing podcast in September 2017, referring to Azov as, quote, the future. They really have the culture out there, he said. They have their own clubs, they have their own bars, they have their own dress style. Back then, Azov compounds, quote, could be described as a small state within a state, Olena Semeniaka, then the head of the international outreach for the Azov movement, told Time magazine. She told the outlet that Azov's mission was to form a coalition of far-right groups across the Western world with the ultimate aim of taking power throughout Europe. One such group was the Atomwaffen Division, whose founder, Brandon Russell, plotted to attack Baltimore's electrical grid to freeze out black people during the wintertime. Other members of the group
reported on that. I reported on the white supremacists who planned on attacking the Baltimore power grid to harm black people. They would go to the power grid that was in the black people neighborhoods. They said they hope some black people who really need heat die, elderly people. You know, it's been a lot of attacks on power grids that I reported on. Nobody else been paying attention to. White supremacists are saying they want a race war to start, you see. But they are being motivated by the Azov Battalion. That's their OGs. Why is Joe Biden and the Congressional Black Coons harming us? Remember, they say they don't like hate here in America. You could have fooled me. You feeding that monster in Ukraine, which all the hateful racists from all over the world are going over there so they can come back to wherever they from, go back to wherever they from and carry out their racist activity.
Well-documented ties to Azov and have been arrested for crimes including murder and distributing bomb-making materials. Another Azov veteran turned National Corps political figure, Vladislav Sobolyevsky, expressed his desire for Ukraine to become a nuclear-armed state in a deleted interview. I want Ukraine to have nuclear weapons. This is the shield and the sword that will allow our state to develop in any version of the foreign policy situation. To conclude, the United States will begin, or already has begun, arming and training a neo-Nazi group that has explicit aims to take over Europe. Are you okay with your tax dollars going towards weapons for a group that aims to establish a Fourth Reich? Let us know in the comments.
Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video or any of our other content,
with Joe Biden and the Democrats and the Warhawks and the Republican Party arming a racist group who want your black ass to serve them, and they don't have no problem telling you that to your damn face. They want your black ass to serve them and the white race. You want to live? Serve them. You know? Say, because unless you serve them, then nah. They say your ass got to go. You know, this is very disgusting. The Congressional Black Coons, they can't get away from this. They cannot get away from going along with funding racists who say they want to put us back in the fields, but they preaching they don't like hate. That's all the hustle, y'all. They tell you that so you will vote Democrat, and they the ones feeding that racist monster.
Known as the Azov Battalion.
Yeah, let's look at this.
Thank you for having me.
To the main concerns, the start that things like this would happen. Submarines, including nuclear, allowing nuclear response to those developments or an escalation, knowing that Cuba has. So you have the U.S. expanding its role in Ukraine, signing a 10-year security deal, allowing the Ukrainians to use U.S. missiles to attack inside Russia. Russia then sends some of its most sophisticated submarines, including nuclear-capable submarines, to Cuba right off the coast of the United States. And now there's a response from the United States from ABC News earlier today. Quote, U.S. submarine pulls into Guantanamo Bay a day after Russian warships arrive in Cuba. Quote, a U.S. Navy submarine has pulled into Guantanamo Bay, Cuba in a show of force as a fleet of Russian warships gather for planned military exercises in the Caribbean. A U.S. Navy submarine has arrived in Guantanamo Bay in a show of force as a fleet of Russian warships gathered for planned military exercises in the Caribbean. U.S. Southern Command and the USS Helena, a nuclear-powered fast attack submarine, pulled into the waters near the U.S. base in Cuba on Thursday, just a day after a Russian frigate, a nuclear-powered submarine, an oil tanker, and a rescue tug crossed into Havana Bay after drills in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, obviously, when the U.S. and Russia start playing games with nuclear submarines off the coast of Cuba, that ought to be very alarming to anyone who has even a minimal understanding of Cold War history. Because again, while I wouldn't equate this to or even put it in the same category yet as the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis came very close to blowing up the entire world. And although it included the basing of Russian nuclear missiles in Cuba at the request of the Cuban government, many of the factors that almost led to an unintended or miscommunication-based nuclear exchange involved Russian submarines in the vicinity of US submarines. It's an incredibly dangerous game to be playing. And it's been so predictable from the start that things like this would happen. And there's no explanation about what justifies taking on a risk like this. Now, at the same time, from CNN yesterday, the US lifts a ban on sending weapons to Ukraine's Azov Brigade. The ban, which had been long in place, called the Leahy Law, prohibits any military assistance or training to be provided to foreign units held responsible for human rights violations, according to the US State Department. And a lot of people have been wondering why that Leahy Law that bans US arms to human rights violators doesn't prohibit the US from sending arms to Israel. But the US government has determined in the past that it does prevent them from sending arms to the Azov Battalion. Quote, the battalion, named the 12th Special Forces Azov Brigade, was integrated into the Ukrainian National Guard in 2023 after the initial formation dissolved. The unit has been praised for its role in the fight against Russian occupation. The unit welcomed the lifting of the ban to receiving security assistance from the U.S., saying in a statement Tuesday, quote, this is a new page in the history of our unit. In other words, this battalion that has long been described as a very dangerous neo-Nazi force, the dominant strain of fighters inside Ukraine, to the point where the US government had put it on its banned list for any weapons or money going to it. Now suddenly they've turned that Azov Battalion into heroes who the US
they
is
ain't
now
renounced nothing. That's it. They ain't renounced. They fighting on behalf of the white race, and we're inferior to white people, and all the they celebrate Hitler's birthday. They ain't renounced none of that. What done changed for Joe Biden in the bootlicking, bug dancing Greek freaks and the congressional raccoons? What's going on here? They haven't renounced their despicable hate for us. Why openly now Joe Biden and the U.S. government is saying, oh, fuck it, we're going to back the Nazis? Why are they doing this?
openly arming and funding. Again, one of the main concerns that Russia said it had with this war is the presence of neo-Nazi units. Obviously, when Russia hears about Nazi or neo-Nazi loyalists right in their region on the other side of the border, given the major trauma that country suffered from the war against Nazis in World War II, that's something that the Russians are going to take very seriously. So it's a series of escalations all happening at once, resulting in some extremely dangerous moves, including the deployment of nuclear submarine or nuclear capable submarines to Cuba by both countries. Now, to help us understand all of this, Lev Golankin is a Ukrainian-American journalist and author born in Ukraine. He has always had an important and relevant perspective on the war in Ukraine. He has written some of the most insightful and heterodox and, by the way, informed articles about Ukraine and the war and the U.S. funding over the last 2.5 years. He frequently writes for journals like The Forward and The Nation. He is the author of a book as well titled A Backpack, a Bear, and 8 Crates of Vodka. We are always happy to have him on our show. It always helps illuminate what's going on in Ukraine. Lev, it's great to see you. Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So let's begin with the last issue that I just discussed, which is the U.S. lifting of this long-standing ban on providing arms and funds to the Azov Battalion on the grounds that, as everybody said, for a full decade until February 2022, was an actual neo-Nazi group, a serious menace inside Ukraine. I want to show you, because there was a foreign policy group, Just Foreign Policy, that criticized the government's lifting of this ban. It was through Eric Sparling, who's with Just Foreign Policy, and what he said, and we have the tweet on the screen, citing the New Washington Post article, UF lifts weapon ban on Ukrainian military unit, meaning Azov. He said, quote, "We've talked about neo-Nazis before in Ukraine. Something the government, sorry, let me just see this tweet here. He said, Azov was barred about a decade ago from using American arms because they determined its founders were racist, xenophobic, and ultranationalist. Quote, we cannot ignore our values. We must live up to them," quoting the State Department. And then the State Department responded to him, essentially justifying why this wasn't a contradiction of what they said. And if we can put that tweet on the screen, they said, fact check for you. The U.S. government never provided support to the now disabled militia known as the Azov Battalion. In contrast, the 12th Special Forces Azov Brigade received arms and equipment after successfully completing necessary security force vetting. So they say two key takeaways. One, the two units are not the same, despite persistent Russian disinformation to conflate them, and we are living up to our values. So what they're saying, Lev, as you know, is, look, there was this thing called the Azov Battalion. We warned it was a neo-Nazi dangerous group for over a decade, but now it rebranded. It's called the Azov Brigade, a totally different organization that is fully consistent with our principles and our values, and that's why we can arm it. What do you make of that defense?
It's getting to the point where North Korea would be embarrassed to have the kind of propagandists that the State Department has, okay? Because don't take Lev Golinkin's word for it. Don't take Glenn Greenwald's. Azov itself just celebrated their 10-year anniversary from the founding of the original 2014 battalion, okay? The government of Kiev, the government of Ukraine also celebrated their founding. So according to the State Department, Azov itself is now part of the Kremlin propaganda. The group that Azov itself admits that it is the same thing as the 2014 battalion. So the State Department is now lying at the point at which even Azov is not descending to. It's and this is the same institution that's telling us to care about disinformation, to care about truth and facts. So this and they're lying at a point where even, like I said, even Azov itself admits that they're the same thing.
And of course, in U.S. liberal discourse and U.S. discourse generally, obviously the worst thing you could possibly be or be called is a Nazi. People are frequently called Nazis inside the United States for having conservative views or views. These are, then they kind of meet the real deal Nazis, like the ones with Nazi collaborators as heroes on their wall, like Stepan Bandera, and all kinds of Nazi insignia that the Azov Battalion and Brigade have been caught wearing. Its leaders still openly do those sorts of things. So let's show the tweets that you were referring to by Azov. So as we mentioned, the Twitter feed of what was the Azov Battalion is now rebranded the Azov Brigade, which the U.S. government says we can arm because it's a brand new, fully vetted organization that has nothing to do with the prior one called the Azov Battalion. And yet, as you say, we have this tweet on the screen from the Azov Brigade. Azov, 10 years. They're celebrating their 10-year anniversary, which is very strange for a group that was just newly created. Quote, this is the path from a few dozen volunteers who had only motivation and faith in justice to a special purpose brigade, one of the most effective units of the Defense Force. It celebrates all the places that they have been fighting in. The path was not easy. We have someone to honor. There is someone to remember, but there is no time to fold our hands. So here you have them saying, no, we're not new. We've been in existence for 10 years, meaning going back to when they were included as Nazis. And then we have another tweet. And again, it's so bizarre because they call themselves now the Azov Brigade to give this impression, but they're very open about the fact that they're not a new group at all. You see this tweet from this week. History of the brigade, the quote, Azov Battalion was established on May 5th, 2014 as a battalion of the Special Purpose Police Patrol Service of the Ministry of Internal Affairs based on the decision of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. So they're calling themselves the Azov Battalion and saying we have a long 10-year history that is exactly the same as the Azov Battalion that the U.S. government is now denying it's actually arming and funding. I mean, it's just hard to comprehend this kind of Orwellian or North Korean propaganda, as you said.
The only reason why it's called a brigade instead of a battalion is because it grew from a battalion to a regiment, then to a brigade. That's the only thing. It's the same thing. It just reflects the size of the men in there, the size of the unit. That is it. And it's amazing how they're just ready to, the State Department just ready to tell you that, you know, white is black and black is white, even as Azov denies it. And I think we talked before about also Washington Post and Western media are also just telling lies about how their leadership, they're under new leadership. And again, it's just easily disproven.
So I guess, you know, if you're somebody who believes that this Russian invasion of Ukraine is not just ethically and legally indefensible, but also some grave threat to all things decent, to like Western security and Western freedom. I suppose an American citizen might say, look, I don't care who I'm arming as long as they're effective fighters against Russia. We saw a lot of that in Syria, where the United States was actually fighting alongside of and eventually arming Al-Qaeda and even some battalions from ISIS. And the argument was, look, we have the same goal, which is to topple Bashar al-Assad, and we'll fund whoever we need to fund in order to help with our war objectives. What about that argument? Like, look, who cares that what Azov's ideology is, as long as they're helping in our security interests and our security objectives, we should fund whoever we want.
The problem is that the Biden administration and pretty much the Western establishment for the past 6-7 years has created this paradigm of we are on the brink between democracy and fascism. Okay, we are on the brink between truth and disinformation, between facts and lies. This is what we are facing. Ukraine, we're not arming Ukraine to fight Russia. We're arming Ukraine to protect democracy, to protect freedom, to protect democratic values. Joe Biden said that the impetus for running for president was after he watched the Nazis march in Charlottesville, Virginia. That's the story that he's giving out. That is what forced him to run for president. That is the impetus for it. That's what inspired him. So you're having this entire narrative of we are fighting fascism and we are fighting lies. And then you just take this and you completely subvert it and you say, just kidding, because when it comes to Ukraine, we'll take care of this. We'll work with neo-Nazis. We'll arm them. They're our friends. And I just want you to pause for a second, Glenn, and just think, like, imagine you're part of the Pentagon or the White House team, okay? And you're like, you know what? There's just one brigade here. There's this one brigade who is known for being neo-Nazi, okay? Why do we have to arm them? Why can't we just arm everybody else? Okay, let's just say we want to arm them. Why do this? Why mess with them? Okay? Or perhaps, you know what? We're going to arm them. So you know what? Why don't we say, hey, you guys, you have to at least change your symbol. The neo-Nazi symbol that you use, you have to at least change it. Okay?
Right, like maybe a condition for arming them could be that they no longer use neo-Nazi insignia, that they no longer revere and treat as heroes people who collaborated with, massacres of Jews inside Ukraine, like Stepan Bandera. Like maybe they could at least make those kind of symbolic concessions, but we don't even demand those.
They are not even giving the most idiotic, simple, meaningless things. Even that, they're not even trying. That is what kind of baffles me. I think it's the big lie notion, the Joseph Goebbels thing, that if you're going to lie, make it as big and proud as possible. And that's what they're doing. They're leaning in, I guess, as the term today goes, because they could have just asked for a couple of simple little things, okay? They could take a picture of their leaders holding the white fragility book, okay? Like, do at least something to try, but they're not even trying, okay? And as a result, both they and you have the Washington Post saying that Azov is under new leadership. And in the Washington Post article, the Washington Post quotes a man who is the deputy commander of Azov, who's been there since its inception. I mean, and who not only that, who this person who is now the deputy commander of Azov, he goes back to the neo-Nazi or gang that founded Azov in the first place. So it's like Washington Post. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, so I just want to insert there because this is an area that has a very long and rich history, obviously, Ukraine and Russia and this whole region. And, a lot of times I think Americans don't look at things from the perspective of other countries. So I remember we interviewed Sarah Wagenknecht, who's a longtime left-wing leader in Germany, who is really split with her longtime party over several things, but principally the German not only funding but provision of tanks to Ukraine. And what she was saying was, and I think is something that a German would think about, or a Russian, but not necessarily people in the United States, was, do you know how traumatic it is for Russia? How strong the reaction would have to be to see German tanks rolling eastward toward Russia through Ukraine? And she was talking about, what are we doing in risking this kind of extreme Russian reaction. Now, the other part of that I want to ask you about is this existence of Nazism inside Ukraine, because when Putin first announced the invasion and explained why, and he was doing so before, he was talking about the eradication of Nazism on the other side of the Russian border. Immediately, people said that was false, that was Russian disinformation. But of course, there are actual neo-Nazi groups inside Ukraine. They're among the most armed and well-trained and dangerous fighters. And we've said that for a long time until it was banned to say it in February 2022. So looking at it from the Russian perspective, now that the United States is doing things like lifting the restrictions on using American missiles to strike inside Russia, lifting the restriction on arming and banning Azov, how do you think the Russians are, whether they're right or wrong, but how do you think they're interpreting those kind of moves?
From the inception, I mean, if you look at the history, and also thank you for considering the history from a different point of view, I think it's so important. But Putin needs to hold Russia together because it is a giant multi-ethnic country and it needs to have an idea uniting it, okay? So one of the biggest things is the legacy of World War II. That's what he has seized on, of Russia as part of the Soviet Union fighting back against Nazis, okay? And that is something that speaks, and this is the part that we forget so much, that millions of Ukrainians died fighting against the Nazis. So when we say that, you know, Ukraine celebrates Stepan Bandera and Ukraine celebrates Nazi collaborators, it's wrong. It's not Ukraine. It's this western part of Ukraine that has hijacked the country and is now running it and imposing its own will upon the country. Saying that Ukraine loves Nazis and worships Nazis, I mean, that is the same thing as saying that everybody in America loves Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee and the Ku Klux Klan. You know, it's a denial of reality. But for Russia, Putin needed something to unite the country, and in the Russian spirit, in the Russian mindset, one of the things that really encourages people and fires people up is the notion of everybody's against us, if we have our back to the wall. So certainly the images of German tanks flowing across Ukraine to Russia, certainly the notion of the West combining and this being a war of NATO on Russia, that is helping get the support for the war because Russia's suffering a lot of losses as well. So that's go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want, let me ask you though then about the war itself, the battlefield itself, like what's actually happening in the war. From the very beginning, there was a big doubt about how Ukraine could possibly win, especially given the way NATO and the United States defined victory, which was the expulsion of every last Russian troop from every inch of Ukrainian soil, including Crimea. It was a massive
very serious ceasefire deal, which would save Ukraine. All that Russia is asking for is denazification, for Ukraine to drop their bid to join NATO and to accept newly drawn Russian territory. This is very similar to a peace deal that was drew up at the beginning of this war that Boris Johnson killed. If Ukraine and the West accepted that deal, Ukraine would have retained more land. So this is a very rational deal that will stop the wholesale slaughter of Ukrainian men. This peace proposal also invalidates and discredits all the neocons that was claiming that Putin's goal was to take over the entirety of Ukraine and then march into Europe. All that Russia wanted was a neutral Ukraine to serve as a buffer between Russia and the West. So now that the unfounded conspiracy theory that Vladimir Putin wants to take over the entirety of Ukraine and march into Europe has been thoroughly debunked, they must be surely happy that Putin is proposing this peace proposal, right? Right? And NATO just declined once again another peace proposal. It's almost like our Western oligarchs don't really want peace in Ukraine. Their argument is any ceasefire deal would benefit Putin. Sound familiar? The same way they say a ceasefire would benefit Hamas, the same way they say not going to war with China over Taiwan would benefit Xi Jinping. You guys notice how the West is always against peace talks in general? If peace talks consistently benefit your enemy, then maybe you're the problem. It's very rare that a major war ends with major military dominance. Wars end with peace negotiations, a concept that our ruling class completely rejects, because the goal of the West is not peace. The goal of the West is not even successful war. It's never-ending, profitable war.
Just now, Ray, a pleasure, my dear friend. How dangerous is it for the West to misread Vladimir Putin? I ask you this in light of what was an open-minded willingness to negotiate articulated by the Russian president late last week, combined with an immediate cessation of military hostilities.
Judge, it's very, very dangerous. Not only that they would not understand it, but that the president and his coterie of advisors may not even have gotten the word that this is very, very serious indeed. In other words, what was it that Putin said? We're just one step away from real trouble. I have the thing here. We're on the verge of real trouble, meaning nuclear use of nuclear weapons. So you have to hope that the intelligence people would be better than they have been for the last 2.5 years. And that's, in my view, a forlorn hope. Even if they tell the president, look, this is the deal that Putin is offering, even if they tell him that, look, you ought to look at it and read it and think about whether you could negotiate taking this into account, there's no indication that they will do that. And the fly in the ointment is the election. They can't possibly agree to the conditions that Putin has reasonably, from his point of view, set down without suffering a definitive defeat in Ukraine, and they fear in the election, and we know what comes after the election. They are in jeopardy of losing their personal freedom, given the fact that judges and courts and emails all over the place have the goods, not only on Hunter, but on Daddy, on Sullivan, and on Blinken.
So we just spent some time with Professor Sachs, who, of course, has been on a jihad for a long time about the unwillingness of this administration even to talk to their Russian counterparts. And you touched on something that I did not ask Jeff Sachs about, but I will ask you to reach into your understanding of the way the intelligence community works. You just alluded to it. Wouldn't Bill Burns say to him, hey, Mr. President, Putin is serious. He really wants to talk to you. We overheard him say this in the men's room to Lavrov. I don't know how into Putin's inner circle they can surveil. But wouldn't a statement like that to Blinken, Sullivan, or Biden give them pause? Or doesn't the CIA do that?
Judge, many of us had high hopes for Bill Burns. He knows a lot about substantive things and what's going on in the world, but he's a cog in the wheel. Witness the fact that in July of last year, he told the president to say that Russia had suffered a strategic defeat. The ineptitude of Russian military forces has been laid bare for the whole world to see. 6 days later, the president in Helsinki said, Putin has already lost this war, we've won. Now, if that's the kind of advice that that Bill Burns and others, Austin, for example, who is well known for falsifying substantive intelligence at the highest level when he was head of CENTCOM, if that's the kind of intelligence they're getting, well, that's just fine with Blinken and Sullivan, who may be smart enough to realize this, but it's not fine when Biden is still making the decisions. And I have to say, the overarching background of all this is look at President Biden roaming around aimlessly at that summit with the G7. My God, that is what the Russians have to take into account. What is he likely to do if Sullivan and Biden say, you know, we ought to use a mini nuke, or we want to scare the hell out of the Russians by doing X, Y, and Z? Well, he's likely to do it, for God's sake. And that's why it's very, very dangerous.
Here's an example of how serious President Putin is. You will hear the translator articulate President Putin's condemnation of Western exceptionalism, recognition of NATO crumbling, and articulation. This is a dangerous phrase, but you can hear him say it. Point of no return. Cut number 8.
Lastly, the self-centeredness and arrogance of Western countries have led us to a highly perilous situation today. We are inching dangerously close to a point of no return. Calls for a strategic defeat of Russia, which possesses the largest arsenals of nuclear weapons, demonstrate the extreme recklessness of Western politicians. They either fail to comprehend the magnitude of the threat they are creating, or are simply consumed by their notion of invincibility and exceptionalism. Both scenarios can result in tragedy. It is evident that the entire system of Euro-Atlantic security is crumbling before our eyes. At present, it is practically non-existent and must be rebuilt. To achieve this, we must collaborate with interested countries, of which there are many, to develop our own strategies for ensuring security in Eurasia, and then present them for broader international deliberation. This is the task set in the address to the Federal Assembly. To outline a vision for equal and indivisible security, mutually beneficial and equitable cooperation, and development on the Eurasian continent in the foreseeable future.
Could you imagine Biden attempting to counter that verbally?
I've read the whole thing, Judge, watched parts of it. It almost seemed to me that he was trying to draw a contrast between Biden wandering around aimlessly, not able to string a whole paragraph together, and himself. It was quite a performance. And the problem is that people don't realize what went on because the New York Times and all those newspapers that follow its lead have obfuscated and deliberately eliminated the real news. And the real news is that there was an agreement. There was an agreement whereby the Ukrainians said, all right, we forswear any idea of joining NATO, okay? And the Russians said, okay, we'll pull back our troops and we won't invade Kiev. And we'll also give you some guarantees. We'll get other people to give you some guarantees because we appreciate that you have concerns as well. That was the deal. That was the 29th of March, okay? On the 30th of March, there was this fake massacre in Bucha near Kiev, where the Ukrainians blamed the Russians, who had already left. Read Scott Ritter on Bucha. The Russians had already left when this massacre took place, and the Ukrainians successfully, with the help of the New York Times and everybody else, blamed that on the Russians and said there can be no dealing with the Russians. And then on the 9th of April, Boris Johnson comes in and says, look, don't deal with the Russians. Don't you Ukrainians, don't deal with the Russians because they're terrible people. We can beat them. We'll give you all the arms you need to beat them. Cancel that deal. 4 days later, Putin recognized the deal was off. What's my point here? The big deal, the notion that Ukraine would join NATO was faced into and agreed to by the Ukrainian negotiators. The head was David Arachamia. Yeah, Arachamia is his name, and he's faction leader in Zelensky's party in the parliament. He was there, and he testified, and he said to the press, let me just include this. I mean, it's just so outrageous how the New York Times has obfuscated and cut all this stuff together. Here's the Kiev Post, okay? Headline, November 26th, 2023. Russia ordered to end the war in 2022 if Ukraine scrapped NATO ambitions, says Zelensky's party chief, who is David Arachamia, okay? What else did he say? He said we had it signed, sealed, and delivered. The Russians would give us some guarantees, and we would agree to remain neutral. We would say we'd be neutral. Now, that's the name of the game. That was what the Russians were most concerned about. No Ukraine in NATO. And the New York Times and everybody else, from the highest officials in our government, and all the others say, oh, no, it's not about NATO. It's about Putin being an aggressor. Last codicil to this, of course, is if, as is clear from the substantive record, as is clear from the Ukrainian chief negotiator, Putin agreed to stop and did stop and took troops away from Kiev as a gesture of goodwill. If he stopped in the Donbass, what's to indicate that he wanted to, after Ukraine, you won't stop. He won't stop. He will go take the rest of Ukraine, he'll take Poland, or go to the English Channel. What's to justify that? Nothing but bollocks, as the British would say. We have our own expression of that. My State Department colleagues call it bovine or masculine bovine excrement.
Right. Here's Foreign Minister Lavrov, who was seated at that same table as President Putin, with what I suggest to you is a very, very savvy analysis of who trusts whom. Cut number one.
You know, we don't ask the West to trust us. Trust is not something which is illustrating the Western positions, the Western actions, and today there were many examples. I don't want to recite those failures to deliver on the promises, those failure to deliver on the legal obligations. Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not. The West must understand the real situation. They don't understand anything except real politics. Let them go to the people. You are democracies, right? Ask the people what the West should do in response to the Putin's proposals.
That's a diplomat. That's a human being that has a grasp on all of this. Your thoughts before we take a little break.
Judge, that is a diplomat. Another diplomat with whom I served, actually, whom I briefed every other morning, name is George Shultz. He would be 102 right now. He died 2 years ago. The last thing he did was a long piece for the Foreign Services Journal. It had to do with trust. Without trust, you can't make anybody make a deal with you. And that was his final message. He was able to get Reagan, Gorbachev to trust one another. It's a big deal, this trust. And there are, Lavrov said, I'm not going to list all the violations of trust that I could, but one of them, and a big one that I have emphasized, is the promise that Biden made personally to Putin on the 30th of December, 2021, not to put offensive strike missiles in Ukraine. They really done that. 3 weeks later, no one knows that better than Lavrov, who talked to Blinken on the 21st of January, 2022. And Blinken said, forget about that. We don't know anything about that. Maybe we can limit the number of offensive strike missiles to Ukraine, but forget about that. So trust is the coin of the realm. And lacking it, you need guarantees. Trust but verify. You can be darn sure the next agreement, such as there will be, will be verifiable, and that's a good thing.
We're going to take a break for a commercial announcement. When we come back, more with Ray McGovern. A little bit of a surprise of Joe Biden at his best or his worst, depending upon whether you like the president, as soon as we come back. But first, this. You all know that I am a paid spokesperson for Lear Capital, but I'm also a customer, a very satisfied customer. About a year ago, I bought gold, and it's now increased in value 23%. So $100 invested in gold a year ago is now worth $123. If you have $100 in the bank, it still shows $100, but $100 in the bank is now worth.
And he continues to fail.
Putin has already lost.
Putin's already lost the war.
Putin has already lost this war. I want to say that, and I want to say it loudly.
Putin has already lost in terms of what he was trying to achieve.
In many ways, Putin has already lost.
And that is Russia has already lost this war.
In short, Russia has lost.
That was a script.
They've lost strategically, operationally, and tactically.
Do these guys have any reverence for the truth or ability to acknowledge they didn't know what the hell they were talking about?
I'm reminded of Julius Caesar and Shakespeare. You know, what is truth? Quid est veritas. The truth is what you want it to be. The problem is that most Americans don't know the truth, largely because the New York Times and others are cooperating consciously with distorting the truth. Now, I mentioned this David Arachamia, okay, the chief negotiator. Now, when was he appointed to negotiate with the Russians? The 28th of February, 2022. That means 4 days after the beginning of the war. Did he go to Belarus? He did. He negotiated. Then he went down to Turkey in Istanbul and came very close to an agreement. He said on the 28th of March, he said, we're really very close to an agreement. And in April, he said, Russia has agreed to almost all of Ukraine's peace proposals. We don't know about whether the US and the UK will agree or not. Whoa, that's Arachamia. Now, what happened next? Boris Johnson was sent by the UK and the US. He arrived in Kiev on the 9th of April, put the kibosh on the whole thing. The New York Times has a major article, 2 major articles on this yesterday in the Sunday Times. No mention, search in vain for mention of Boris Johnson and the way he put the kibosh on this whole thing. So Americans are led to believe, as here it is. Here's the headline, New York Times yesterday, the big thing that spread all over page 10, 11. Ukraine-Russia peace is elusive as ever. It's elusive as ever because the representatives of the warring nations, they held peace talks, but they fizzled. You know why they fizzled? Because they resorted to military action. And that's just the other way around. They were successful, and we have the documents, for God's sake. But Johnson came in, told Zelensky. Zelensky was stupid enough to rely on Western promises, and they went to war. Admittedly, say, no, we're going to follow this militarily. We depend, the U.S. says that they're with us for as long as it takes. We'll do it. Now, Judge, if I get a little emotional about this, I care about 500,000 young Ukrainian dead now, and their mothers and their other relatives. They would not be dead if that agreement was allowed to go through between Russia and Ukraine. And again, the cardinal, the sine qua non for Russia was given by these Ukrainian negotiators, and that is no Ukraine in NATO.
I'm going to make you feel a little better. I don't usually read aloud what the viewers write in, but Lenny 1777 writes this. Ray McGovern keeps getting younger each time he goes live with Judge Napolitano.
That's good news.
Well, I couldn't resist because I know you got a little emotional there. We saw a clip from Secretary Austin telling Senator Tuberville that Ukraine can win, along with all the other nonsense from the president and his buddies. Here's Secretary Austin last week, just as nonsensical and irritating. Putin is in no position to dictate to Ukraine. We're in a position to dictate to all the countries in the world, but Putin's in no position to dictate to Ukraine. Number 7.
He is not in any position to dictate to Ukraine what they must do to bring about a peace. I think, that's exactly the kind of behavior that we don't want to see. We don't want to see a leader of one country wake up one day and decide that he wants to erase borders and annex the territory of his neighbor. That's not the world that any of us want to live in. And so I think he is not in my view, not in a position to dictate to Ukraine what it must do to pursue peace.
Here's the world we do live in from the perspective of the president of Russia, cut number 2.
Let me remind you that at the end of the 20th century, after the end of the acute military ideological confrontation, the global community had a unique opportunity to build a reliable and just order in the field of security. This did not require much. A simple ability to listen to the opinions of all interested parties and a mutual willingness to take them into account. Our country was determined to do exactly this kind of constructive work. However, a different approach prevailed. The Western powers, led by the United States, believed that they had won the Cold War and had the right to determine how the world should be organized.
He's right. They believed they had won the Cold War and had the right to determine how the world should be organized. The very mentality condemned by Secretary Austin and attributed to the other side.
Judge, from an intelligence point of view, I have to remind people that is the Pentagon that does the military intelligence now. There is no independent military analysis capability left in the CIA. There was when I was there, and we took great umbrage at what the Pentagon was saying about Vietnam, for example. So here's Austin. Here's Austin, against whom over 50 intelligence analysts at CENTCOM, where he was commander, and at Defense Intelligence Agency filed a formal complaint with the Pentagon Inspector General saying Austin was shaping the intelligence, was making the intelligence look like what the president wanted. Okay, so this is the same Austin. Didn't Biden know that? Well, maybe he did. Maybe that's what Sullivan and Blinken wanted. Anyhow, he's not giving the president any good intelligence about enemy capabilities. Now, he went to West Point, right? Obama didn't go to West Point, and Obama's famous dictum, 2016, was, look, we shouldn't give the Ukrainians the idea that they could prevail against a much stronger Russia on its border. And at that time, Blinken himself, working for Obama as Deputy Secretary of State, added, if we give arms to Ukraine, that would not be smart because Russia is in a position to double what we give, to triple and quadruple what we give. That was Blinken in 2016. Why did he change his mind? I guess because megalomania prevailed with Biden and his closest associates to say, we can do this because we're exceptional, because we're indispensable, because we're the United States of America. Well, those days are over now. And Obama happened to be right on that one.
What is the value of intel if it's infested with politics?
Zero. Or actually -0. Now, Judge, there are very few things I can cite that can show how good intelligence can really prevent wars. And one is that after Iraq, the next target was Iran. Bush and Cheney had their sights on Iran. So the question was, how close is Iran to getting a nuclear weapon? And the standard answer was 5 years from now. 5 years. They've been saying this for 20 years, right? So finally, an honest An honest intelligence manager named Tom Finger came in from the State Department and said, look, I'll do this job. I'll run this estimate on how close Iran is to getting a nuclear weapon if you let me bring my own people in and you leave me alone for a year. That happened. The year was 2007. In November, the conclusion, unanimous with high certainty, Iran stopped working on a nuclear weapon in 2003 and has not resumed work on a nuclear weapon. Unanimous with high confidence. It was out there because Congress made it public, and Bush himself wrote in his memoirs, this deprived me of the military option on Iran, because how could I possibly explain a nuclear attack or some kind of attack on a country that the intelligence community says has no active nuclear weapons program? And quote, oh, too bad, huh? Deprived me of the military option. So what I'm saying here is that if you get an honest guy and you get honest analysts, and they're given their freedom to tell the truth, they can prevent a war. And I wish I could cite other examples, but I can't really. Yeah, here you have.
Isn't this hogwash?
Well, of course. It's bollocks, as the British would say. It's male bovine
for those who are taking the show just audio only, when I say isn't this hogwash, this is the famous or infamous picture of Prime Minister Netanyahu at the UN claiming that Iran is in the final stage of developing a nuclear weapon. I don't know the date on that. I think that's about 10 or 12 years ago.
That's my recollection. About 7 or 8 years ago, I would say.
So they made all this up.
Yeah, and there's terrific works done on this. Gareth Porter, who writes for Consortium News, has written a book about this. And the evidence is there from UN inspectors, from some former Israeli officials, from Iranian officials. It's all there. It's bollocks. It's all made up. And it's meant, of course, to justify war against Iran. And it almost worked. So that's why I emphasize. Yeah, I wish I could cite other instances where national intelligence estimates, the supreme genre of intelligence, where it worked that way and prevented a war. I can't, but that's big enough for me. And yes, I was prevented from saying destroy the CIA because I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and now the baby is drowning in that same bathwater.
Wow. The Netanyahu photo, Chris tells me, was September of 2012. So we were both very, very close. Ray, a pleasure, my dear friend. Terrific analysis from you, as always. I was happy to hear the Russia Today people ask me to give my opinion.
Nixon here, in light of all of these discussions about peace in Ukraine and Ukraine peace get-togethers in Switzerland or Sweden or wherever the hell, let's talk about the reality. Can there be peace in Ukraine? Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about this whole business about peace in Ukraine. You know, there was a meeting where a bunch of countries got together with the exclusion of one of the parties of a conflict, the principal party, the party that's dominating and winning the conflict. We can't talk to, we mustn't talk to them. How are you going to possibly get peace if you talk to both parties in a conflict? No, you only want to talk to one party in a conflict to get peace. And they came up with some kind of a worthless document that most of the parties that were involved didn't even sign. I mean, anytime you come up with a so-called peace document and the Vatican won't even sign it, you ain't got much, right? But let's get to the reality of this, because I've been watching people have this discussion, even people who are who have great knowledge of this conflict, talk about how can we come to a resolution and blah, 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 and what do we need to do, and all the parties involved, and what's good and bad for Ukraine and Europe and the US. And I listen to them and I'm like, that's a bunch of crap. It's garbage. This is trash. What are you talking about? Peace in Ukraine. What are you talking about? How can we get peace in Ukraine? See, here's the thing. They're not acknowledging a major reality. The discussion of peace in Ukraine, as though this is a conflict, as though Russia invaded Ukraine to fight Ukraine and defeat Ukraine, and then this is a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. That is not at all what this is. Ukraine is a political tool. Russia is addressing a political tool that is being used against them. Ukraine. So here's the U.S. and the European argument, which consistently changes, right? One of them is, let me see if I can think of them. One of them is that Vladimir Putin, because there's no such country as Russia, it's just Vladimir Putin for some reason. Putin, right? That Vladimir Putin woke up one morning and decided, I don't like democracy on my doorstep. And Ukraine is a democracy, therefore we're just going to attack them because, democracy. Who wants democracy, for God's sakes? We hate democracy. Hey, there's democracy on your doorstep. Let's start a war, because that's what you got to do if you're Vladimir Putin and there's democracy on your doorstep. Okay, that's one. The other one is, I'm trying to get them all together, that Russia wants to expand the empire of Russia, the gigantic worldwide empire with 800 and some bases all over the world, encircling all of its competitors. Oh, no, wait a minute, that's the US. Russia wants to expand in the area and reconstitute the Soviet Union and take all of these countries. Meanwhile, Russia has a weak military that can't possibly defeat Ukraine, but at the same time, Russia wants to attack Europe, and Europe has to be prepared because Russia's going to attack Europe. Once it finishes with Ukraine, it's going to attack Europe. I'm not even sure why. I'm not even sure why they're going to attack Europe in this particular scenario, but that's all of the crap that's together. But let's get down to reality. If you're going to talk about peace in Ukraine, what do you have to talk about? What do you have to discuss, right? If you and I got a beef, we got a problem, we are about to come to blows, or we come to blows and we want to resolve it, what do we have to address? The reason for the fight. If there's a war, you must address the reason for the fight. The problem that the US has in getting to an end to these conflicts is, and I better turn off the ringer here. Actually, I should leave it on, the ringer on my phone, because as most people know by now, I do not have a proper YouTube show until my ringer goes off at least once. So we're not going to have a proper one. You know what? I'm going to turn that ringer on. I will wait, because everybody knows at some point that ringer goes off and we can move forward. Someone said your site notifications don't work. Yeah, what a shock. No, it isn't that they don't work. Yeah, they don't work all right. They don't work if YouTube turns them off. And oh, by the way, one other thing I want to throw at people. Some people might have watched. I did a very, very good show with Professor Peter Kuznick, a world-renowned historian, the other day on nuclear war, the nuclear conflict, the potential for that, and also some history about the U.S. and the attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Right? Everybody looked at that and said, wow, that's a pretty good show, Garland. I really think a lot of good stuff. Interesting. YouTube demonetized it. They're like, oh, you're trying to stop nuclear war, for God's sake. And you're telling a history about what the U.S. did in Nagasaki and Japan and Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Demonetized it. Demonetized it. YouTube demonetized that show. Isn't that interesting? Here's what I'd like those some people to do. Go out and go take the Rockfin or the Rumble version, either one, Rockfin or Rumble. Share them online. Also, on that share, put at YouTube, so YouTube sees it, and put YouTube demonetize this. Watch it on a, this is what I used to always do when they demonetize the video. I put YouTube demonetize this video, watch it on a true free speech platform so you can see why they demonetized it. So the Rockfin or Rumble version of that, if you would share that on Twitter and places like that. So, and make sure you put at YouTube so they can see we demonetized it. And people are going, that's why people are going to other platforms. Okay, so let's keep going. So bottom line is this. So what we got to look at, if there is a discrepancy between, if there's a, not a discrepancy, if there's a fight or some kind of an issue between two parties, is what is it all about? Right? Here's my argument. The U.S. can't possibly get anywhere near peace in Ukraine. Nowhere near it. Nowhere close to it. They can't have a discussion about peace in Ukraine. They can't have a discussion about how to get there. And God forbid they can't have it, right? People are like, well, they're still fighting and Ukraine's losing and Ukraine's being smashed and crushed and blah, blah, blah. And to which I say, wait a minute. They said from the very beginning, what part of Lindsey Graham saying fight to the last Ukrainian didn't get through, to the last Ukrainian didn't get through your cranium? Why are they still fighting? People are like, what's going on here, man? They're losing X amount of people a day. Everything's being knocked down, beaten, destroyed. Why are they continuing to go? There's not the reason, least of which being they told you why. I have heard it said, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. When the U.S. said, fight to the last Ukrainian, here's what they meant. I'm going to clarify for those who people don't understand it. If there are any living Ukrainians still alive, still surviving, still on this planet, breathing air, living Ukrainians alive, those three words, if there are any of those three things existing, continue the fight until there are none. That's what they meant. Let's not beat around the bush. Fight to the last Ukrainian. What part of fight to the last Ukrainian isn't getting through people's thick head? Why are they still fighting it? I don't know. Let me count. How many Ukrainians we got left? About 15 million. Well, there's 15 million reasons why the U.S. empire is not ready to stop fighting. To the last Ukrainian. This country is a tool, it is a weapon, and the lives of the Ukrainians are fuel for the machine in the same way that the lives of the Europeans and the Americans every single day are nothing but fuel for the machine. The elite ruling class see you as fuel for the machine, you as cannon fodder, the same damn way they see the Ukrainians. Whether it's economic cannon fodder, that's why they don't care about taking your jobs, taking your benefits, locking you up, down. You can't leave your house until we say you can leave your house. You got to do what we tell you to do. Why? Because your lives are of no value to them. Well, I put it like this. When you put gas in your vehicle or diesel fuel or whatever it is, that gas or diesel fuel has a value. The value is it must be destroyed, broken down, burned up so that your machine can do whatever it does as a result of that fuel. Your labor, your life, your family, everything, your happiness, everything. You are a tool to be used to feed their narcissistic sociopathic value. And they even said it with the Ukrainians. We're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. Are there Ukrainians left? Yes. Then they don't want to end the fight. Let's leave it there. Let's move on. Now, all the discussion of, the meeting in Bern or wherever the hell it was, about having peace and bringing all these countries and coming up with it. And why aren't the Russians there? The Russians weren't there because they don't want peace, because they can't even have a discussion. Let's do this. Let's look. When they were honest, they were honest. They've already told us why. They've already told us why, what they want, how they want it, what the outcome is they're shooting for, and why they have no desire for peace, because this is not about peace. This is about war. Let's go here. for those of you who, many of you have seen me go over this document before, but I would be not covering this thing properly if I didn't cover this document at least very briefly. It was written by the RAND Corporation, which is funded by the U.S. Pentagon, right? Overextending and unbalancing Russia. Look at the day it was published, April 24th, 2019. Long before there was any thought of a Russian invasion, right? So let's look at it. Here's what's interesting. Here's what I'm going to do with this document. I'm going to search this document. I'm going to hit Command F, and I'm going to put the word Ukraine in. So this is before the Ukraine conflict. What were they up to? What were they thinking about? We've got to unbalance and overextend Russia. But why? I think we know why, but let's talk about it. So 2019, 3 years before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Russian intervention in Ukraine, whatever language you want to use, the Pentagon was saying we got to overextend and unbalance Russia, right? Let's go Command F. We're going to do a search, and we're going to search the word Ukraine. Okay, wait a minute. Oop, I always do that the wrong way. Let's go over to this document. We're going to go Command F, Ukraine. And what we find is that this is in this document 7 times. So 7 times prior to, 3 years prior to the Ukraine conflict, the U.S. empire told you what they were all about and how they saw Ukraine. Let's look at it. The first thing, we're going to examine all 7 of these times that they use the term Ukraine. Let's start here. The first one says, we encourage you to explore this. And this is April. So this was right after the Ukraine conflict. However, because Russian state media entities and individuals sympathetic to Putin's decision to invade Ukraine have mischaracterized this research in recent weeks, we encourage you to explore this helpful resource of Russia's fire hose of falsehood approach to propaganda. Let me tell you something. You notice what they say? That they have mischaracterized this research, but they don't tell you how. They mischaracterize it. Really, how? That's not important now. We'll just keep our mouths shut. We'll just say that. You know, they kill me with that. Oh, this is propaganda. Explain how it's propaganda. Well, I'm not going to mischaracterize it. I'm just going to read it. Why don't we do that? Why don't we just read it? Why don't we just not mischaracterize it? 3 years before the Ukraine incident, the Pentagon wrote a document that said they wanted to overextend and unbalance Russia, assessing the impact of cost-imposing options. So let's go on. What did they want to do, and why? They wanted to take Russia apart, screw Russia apart, right? Let's go down and see how many times. Here's the first thing. What did they want to do in 2019, long before anything was going on in Ukraine? Providing lethal aid to Ukraine would exploit Russia's greatest point of external vulnerability. So they told you that they saw Ukraine as Russia's greatest point of external vulnerability. They said, this is where Russia is most vulnerable. That's what the Pentagon said 3 years. We recognize the most vulnerable point is Russia. But any increase in U.S. military arms and advice to Ukraine would need to be carefully calibrated to increase the cost to Russia of sustaining its existing commitment without provoking a much wider conflict in which Russia would have significant advantages. So they admitted that Russia would have advantages. So what they said is, we got to send military weapons to Ukraine, stuff to Ukraine, but Russia's going to have the advantages. In other words, they knew that Ukraine was going to be dashed to pieces. Hey, we got to send lots of weapons to Ukraine. Really? And what do you think will happen? Oh, well, Russia's far too powerful. Ukraine to have a chance. Think about this for a second. What they're saying is they knew what was going to happen. But then think about this. But then they said, look, once the conflict started, what they say? Oh, Ukraine's going to win. Ukraine's powerful. Russia's weak. But before it started, they said, we got to start sending weapons to Ukraine. Yeah, but what do we need to know about that? Well, we got to be careful because Russia's far more powerful than Ukraine. So they were simply lying. They said, listen to this. without provoking a much wider conflict in which Russia, by reason of proximity, would have significant advantages. They knew Ukraine was nothing but a patsy. It was James Earl Ray. It was Sirhan. It was, you name them. It was a patsy. And they knew that it would get flattened. And they said so right here, right? Let's keep going. So that's the first thing. And there they got a little graph, right? And then this little graph, they put provide lethal aid to Ukraine. Likelihood of success in extending Russia, moderate. Benefits, high. Costs and risks, high. One of the costs and risks is, it could cause us all to die in a nuclear conflict. So in the very beginning, they said, let's give a bunch of weapons to Ukraine. What's the likelihood of success? Moderate. I mean, it may work, it may not. So they're saying they knew in the very beginning that when they gave weapons to Russia, it may work, it may not. But what they're pretending to you is they didn't know that. Well, what a shock. Let's keep going. This just says Muscovites protesting the war in Ukraine and Russia supportive separatism. So this picture was put in after that, right? Okay, let's keep going. Let's see. I'm gonna go down here. Six. Okay, there's the picture. Let's go one more. Okay, so what's the next thing they say? Increasing U.S. forces in Europe, increasing European NATO member ground capabilities, and deploying a large number of NATO forces on the Russian border would likely have only limited effects on extending Russia. All the options would enhance deterrence, but the risks vary. A general increase in NATO. Now, you notice they use the word deterrence, would enhance deterrence, but the name of the document is unbalancing and overextending Russia. They can't even keep their lives together. They put in, we're going to overextend and unbalance Russia. And then in the document, they use the word, but we're trying to deter them. From what? What are you trying to deter them? You have claimed that you want to overextend and unbalance them, and now you're claiming it's deterrence. Let's continue. A general increase in NATO ground force capabilities in Europe, including closing European NATO member readiness gaps and increasing the number of U.S. forces stationed in traditional locations in Western Europe, would have limited risk. But large-scale deployment on Russia's borders would increase the risk of conflict with Russia, particularly if perceived as challenging Russia's position in eastern Ukraine, Belarus, or Caucasus. So they say it would increase the risk of conflict if Russia saw them as challenging Russia's position in eastern Ukraine, Belarus, or Caucasus. And what did they do? What did they do? So they tried to do, particularly they're doing that. And are they challenging Russia's positions in eastern Ukraine? Absolutely, that's what they did, right? So we see here, I started off, I'm not going to go over it, but in a document overextending and unbalancing Russia that was written 3 years before the conflict. And one of the principal discussions was Ukraine. We're going to overextend and unbalance Russia. Ukraine, yeah, that's how we're going to do it. And they said Ukraine is their biggest vulnerability. So what did the U.S. say? We're going after Russia's biggest vulnerability. That's the reality here, right? Now, let's get to what I'm talking about. I had to lay a pretext, the context down in order to get to what I'm talking about. Here's the big problem. We hear Macron and these people talking about Russia must be stopped. Russia can't be allowed to win. If Russia wins, then, our hegemony is gone. Yeah, it's already gone. If Russia wins, there can be no peace. Big countries can attack little countries. I mean, all of these absurd lies from people who attacked, Serbia, Yugoslavia, and need I even go to Libya and Iraq and Afghanistan? So they attack people all over the world, and then they say Russia can't be allowed to attack a country that we are in on Russia's border, right? Russia said, I will not allow NATO and Ukraine in NATO. So NATO said, well, if you won't allow Ukraine in NATO, fine, then we'll put NATO in Ukraine. You imagine that? We'll just change it. We'll just change the verbiage of it. Okay, Ukraine's not in NATO, but NATO's in Ukraine. And Russia says, okay, I told you, if you do that, it's a fight. I don't care about the semantics. Russia basically said, what I said is, you try to do what you're doing now, then there's going to be a fight. I'm not going to allow Ukraine in NATO. So they said, technically, right, we won't allow them. They're not in NATO, but we're doing everything the same way. Let me ask you this. Can you think of a NATO state that has gotten more or even as much military and economic support as Ukraine? So let's face it. Here's what they did. They brought Ukraine into NATO. They just didn't say it. They didn't vote on it. Technically, what's supposed to happen is all the countries are supposed to vote. Then they've got these rules, and then which clearly, if you have a border dispute, you can't be in NATO. All these other things, and then it must be a unanimous vote, right? So what the U.S. empire said is, we don't need a unanimous vote. Let's just bring them in. So in reality, let's be honest. If they say we're not going to allow Garland to play on our basketball team. Sorry, Garland, you can't play on our team. Why? Because you have to be, it's a 35 and under team. I don't know, 35 and whatever. You don't meet the criteria. This is Anne Arundel County. I live in Anne Arundel County. This is an Anne Arundel County league, and you live in Baltimore County. So you can't, these are the rules. Sorry, Garland, you can't play on this recreational Anne Arundel County recreational league team because we got the rules and you don't fit the criteria. So they say, okay, all right, here's what the team says. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring Garland to the games. We're going to put him in a uniform that has the name of our team on it. It's going to have his name on the back. It's going to have a number. We're going to put him in the books so that every time he scores a basket or he gets a rebound or a block, it goes in the books. We're going to count any of the baskets that he makes and all the stats towards the end. Right. We're going to put him on, write his name on the team roster so that Garland's name is on the team roster. He has a uniform. He's going to play in all the games. Right. If in fact he wins MVP of the league, he'll be eligible for MVP or any other kind of things that are awards that are run for the league. We're going to do all that. But Garland's not playing in our league. He's not in our league. He's not even a member of our team. Granted, he has a uniform on that says, I don't know, Pasadena, Maryland basketball league or something. The Pasadena Chargers, I don't know, whatever. Granted, he has that on. Granted, he actually comes to the game and sits on the bench. Fair enough. He gets in the game, he plays. He's productive. Sometimes he has a bad game. Fair enough. At the end, we won by 2. Garland scored 2 buckets. And in fact, he made the last shot. He made a layup and we won. Hooray. We got another victory. Garland's not on the team. He's not officially a member of the team. Well, guess what? Verbally, he's not. But he is in, in the physical world, right? That's all they did with Ukraine. Ukraine's not a member of NATO. We'll do everything. In fact, let's put it a different way. Ukraine wasn't a member of NATO. Ukraine was a product of NATO. Ukraine was a tool of NATO. It was an instrument of NATO. It was a political tool of NATO. It was a physical tool of NATO. It was a staging ground of NATO for an attack on Russia. That's what it was. They were building NATO. The Brits said they were going to build a base on the Black Sea. Right, as they can't even build a base in England, as everything falls apart. So was it a part of NATO? It was an instrument, a tool, whatever. And the Russians, are like, look, we don't care what you call it. Ain't happening. You do that, we have a fight. Very important for this particular talk, because that now takes us to the big lie. And that is that the U.S. the NATO conflict, it's even hard for me to put it into words, that the Russia-NATO conflict, that the Russia-Ukraine conflict is an individual conflict between Ukraine and Russia, and that it is not part of a world domination plan by DC. And, I'll put it like this. To argue that Ukraine is fighting Russia makes as much sense as saying the European countries are independent sovereign entities that are not completely and totally dominated and controlled by the US empire, that they have some level of independence. Let me ask you this. If they're independent and sovereign, then why the hell could the U.S. blow up the Nord Stream, and all of these countries who benefited from that and who now suffer as a result of it can't admit that the U.S. did it, though everybody knows it. They can't admit that they were attacked by their master. They have to pretend that Russia's the threat, when in fact the U.S. empire is the threat. And now that Russia's winning, they have to pretend as though any peace deal would be between Ukraine and Russia. The reason you can't have a peace deal between Russia and NATO, Russia and the U.S. empire, is because the U.S. empire can never admit the truth. If, in order to get a peace deal, the U.S. empire has to do two things, or one of two things. Number one, it has to separate the Ukraine conflict from the rest of its world domination plan, which it can't do, because without the Ukraine conflict, the Ukraine project, it doesn't have a world domination plan. It completely falls apart. It has to do that. Number two, it has to tacitly admit that the whole thing was a lie. It has to tacitly admit that, to say, okay, you know what? Let's sit down and talk about this. At that point, the Russians have said, great. And while we're doing that, let's talk about a security plan for all of Europe, which would not only free Ukraine from the grasp of the U.S. empire, because at that point, then when Ukraine can't be, at the end of this conflict, if Ukraine can't be a tool for the U.S. empire, then it has to be independent. If it can't host U.S. weapons and U.S. soldiers and be a U.S. platform with CIA at minimum for attacks on Russia, of what value is it to the U.S. empire? The U.S. empire can't use it. It doesn't need it, which at that point, if the U.S. can't use it as a tool, it's just going to walk away. I mean, look, the U.S. doesn't stay in countries just to stay in a country. They stay in countries to use the country as a tool. And if Ukraine is no longer a tool, the U.S. walks away. And when the U.S. walks away, Europe has no use for it. At that point, Ukraine says to Russia, help! We're hungry, we're starving, we're cold. At that point, it benefits Russia to help Ukraine, to strengthen Ukraine, right? It benefits Russia. And now Ukraine goes back, most of it anyway, except for maybe Bandera land, and even that, if it's denazified, goes back into Russia's orbit, because the U.S. don't need it. And the U.S. ain't going to stay there and help it and do anything if it can't use it as a weapon. And at that point, not only does it free Ukraine, it frees Europe. Because at that point, the whole game is out. The whole, let's find a way in Europe to go after Russia. And so this whole thing of what was the plan of blowing up the Nord Stream about? What was this whole big thing about? It was part of one of the foundations of NATO, right? Part of the foundational parts of NATO is keep the Americans in, keep the Germans down, which to keep the Germans down, that means to keep the Germans from accessing the enormous and almost unlimited resources of Russia, so that German economy and industry can grow along with the rest of it, right? If in fact you lose Ukraine, and now you can't use Ukraine to unbalance Russia, you can't unbalance Russia. If you can't use Ukraine and Georgia, which they've lost Georgia now, they're in the process of losing Georgia completely, you can't unbalance Russia. If you can't unbalance Russia, all your other machinations of such as 2016, I saw a video of Condoleezza Rice basically saying then the Europeans are going to have to understand that and I'm paraphrasing, that at some point they're going to get cut off from Russian energy. They have to understand, they have to be prepared. I know it's going to be tough. In other words, it ain't up to them. Look, are they going to suffer? Are they going to go down? Are they going to be destroyed economically? Sure. But that's their job. In the same way that Ukraine is a political tool to go after Russia, all of Europe is a political tool. Not to go after Russia, yes, but to be sacrificed in the cause of U.S. imperial world domination, and the Europeans are just going to have to accept that. Yeah, they got a nice economy, and will their economy fall apart without Russian energy and Russian resources? Sure, but they're going to have to accept that's what's coming. Those are the breaks. Sorry, sucks to be you. We're the ones in power, and you're the ones who are going to have to bite the bullet for our machinations towards U.S. Imperial domination of the world. As the Ukraine falls apart, Europe has got, as the European dominant, the U.S. imperial domination of Ukraine falls apart, so the domination of Europe has to follow. Because at that point, what other methods do you have to use the European continent to unbalance Russia? At that point, you've lost the game. We're going to use it to unbalance Russia. Sorry, that ain't going to work. What else do you have? Russia, one of the things that Russia's working on, and I understand why, they're working on what they call a Eurasian security agreement. In other words, you know, the stands, Europe, Eurasia, Russia, and the stands, as they call them, Kazakhstan, all of that, Uzbekistan, all on and on and on, all the way to Asia, right? A security group, a group that can, that can stop, color revolutions, that can protect themselves, because what they know is this: the U.S. uses Ukraine. I can't punch it from this side. Okay, I'll try to go. They've already started an Armenia, right? So we can't get you from Europe, right? Okay, we'll go around the other side, and we'll try to come in through the stand, through the Eurasia, and we'll try to get you that way. It's all about taking out. And Russia is simply saying, okay, we're going to preempt that by building a security agreement throughout that area, so you can't come in from that. We already know your game, so we ain't gonna let you come in the back door and get us. We're closing off the front door. But the problem that the U.S. empire has is it can't admit the big lie. The lie is Russia attacked Europe for fill in the blank. I mean, attacked Ukraine for fill in the blank. They don't like democracy, blah, blah, blah. The big truth is Russia attacked Ukraine, intervened in the war in Ukraine, because the U.S. was getting closer and closer to their goal of bringing NATO fully into Ukraine to a point where they could put nuclear weapons in Ukraine, that they could place more and more things, that they could further weaponize Ukraine and have it bristling with weapons to attack on Russia's border. Russia just says, nah, Russia said no. No. And Russia said, look, we're big enough and strong enough to stop you. We'd be fools to let you do it, especially when we can stop you. If we couldn't stop you, and while we were kind of weaker, yeah, it would have been tough. But Russia was like, we got our economy where we want it to be. We got our industrial power where we want it to be. We got our diplomatic alliances where we want them to be. We've got our economy in a situation where we think we maybe can hold off you guys for an economic attack. We got hypersonic missiles and all this. We got everything we need in place. Now we're going to knock you off our border because we know what you're doing. And we know. See, the truth is the Americans and the Russians, the two entities that are at war here, both know the game. See, here's the truth. The Americans and the Russians both know the game. And the Americans and the Russians don't really have to hide it. They're looking eye to eye. And the Russians are like, we know what you're doing. And the Americans, truth be told, were like, yeah, we know what we're doing. You know what we're doing. But look, we got these shilamazzles. We got these idiots around our colonies they know what we're doing. But they kind of had benefited from U.S. imperialism, and now it's their time to be sacrificed for U.S. imperialism. We fatten them up. We fatten them up, and now it's Christmas time. And what do you do with that goose you've been fattening for Christmas time? He's going on the table. And that's Europe now. They've been fattening Europe up ever since 1945, fattening them. It's Christmas time, Europe. It is Christmas time. And now guess what happens to that fat goose? It's going to get stuffed with cranberry and liver or some God knows stuffing. You're getting stuffed, you're getting on the table, and the U.S. is going to eat you. And they might ask Russia if they want a slice. And the Russian and the Europeans are having the Europeans, what is the turmoil in Europe? The turmoil in Europe right now, the economic turmoil, the political turmoil, all of this crap. What is that about? It's about destabilization. You know what I mean? Look what's happening as far as people are in the streets, and there's Macron. He's probably going to get voted out. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in the elections in Britain and in the UK. You got all kind of craziness going on. What's happening? The Europeans are being forced to come to grips with the big truth. They're being pushed past the big lie, right? The big truth is that you've never been anything but patsies. The big truth is that that the Europeans who are still supporting the U.S. empire have Stockholm syndrome. They always used you. They used you in the Second World War. They got you flattened in the Second World War. What did they do? The U.S., the UK, etc. They built up this monstrous machine in Germany, and they had the nerve to make a move on Palestine and pretend as though Palestine, that somehow they had a right to go to another country and to make another country pay for the anti-Semitism in Europe. The truth of the Holocaust in Europe was this: it was a crescendo of 1,000 years of anti-Semitism. The truth of it is that Europe was anti-Semitic, and that they had done 1,000 years of pogroms and terrible things to the Jewish people. And then what happened? And then finally it came to a loud crescendo. And in the end, what did they say? Oh my gosh, there's terrible anti-Semitism here, which they were right. What are we going to do? We need a land for the Jews. And you might add, they were like, and how can we get rid of them? Because we really don't like them. That was it. We need a land for the Jews. Where? Somewhere else. Certainly not here, because what does Zionism say? Zionism says they got to leave Europe and America and all, because they ain't safe here. How would you know? Well, we know they ain't safe here because we the one been killing them for 1,000 years. And then what are you going to do? We're going to use them. We're going to go to another part of the world. We're going to do settler colonialism over there. We're going to send the Jews in an area where they will be hated because we're stealing people's land and we're killing people allegedly on behalf of the Jews, allegedly on behalf of, to bring a good area for the Jewish people to be safe from us. They got to be safe from anti-Semitism. Where's anti-Semitism? Here amongst us. And where will they be safe? Over there. Let's go steal some land. We'll stick the Jewish people in there. We'll say it's for their own good. And then we will arm that area to the friggin' teeth. And then we will use that military outpost to launch attacks and to launch intelligence operations all over the region. And we'll say we did it for the Jewish people to save them from us. Yep. And the U.S. then said, thank you, England, for doing that. And we'll now take that military intelligence outpost and use it for our own evil and diabolical needs. So Europe's never been anything but a patsy. They built this monster in Germany. And then when the monster went crazy, they said, everybody, let's go over to Europe and let's blow the hell out of Europe and flatten Europe. And then Europe was flat. And afterwards, they said, oh, boy, Europe is nice and flat, aren't they? We'll do the Marshall fund and we'll go rebuild Europe in the way that we want them. We'll leave Operation Gladio and we'll leave a bunch of people over there to dominate European politics, to do assassinations, to do government coups and overthrow and control the governments of Europe. And we'll tell them we're their friends. We'll build bases all over Europe and we'll say, we're doing that to protect you from the Russians. These will be bases of occupation and domination, so that we can thwart anything that Europe thinks that they may have in the future regarding independence and sovereignty. That's the truth. And now you got a bunch of Europeans with Stockholm syndrome. They're they're oppressors. They are now being used, wasted away, economy destroyed by their oppressor, by their jailer. And now what do they have left? They can project propaganda on the wall of your jail cell. That's what all they're doing. The BBC, the Washington Times, the Washington Post, whatever that is, all of the news around Europe is nothing but projecting lies and propaganda on the walls of your jail cell to tell you how good you got it in jail. your jailer who beats you, who starves you, barely gives you a little bit of gruel once a month, just enough to barely survive. And now they're pulling the rug out from under you on survival. And so now you got a bunch of dummies running around Europe with a blue and yellow flag saying we support our jailers. And once the jailers reflect propaganda and lies on your jail cell, you read them, and then you go around the jail telling the rest of the people, hey, we've got to support our jailers and our masters. They're here to protect us. They're here to look out for us. What a pathetic situation. What an embarrassing and humiliating situation the Europeans now find themselves in. An entire continent humiliated and degraded by the U.S. empire. A laughing stock of the world. Yeah, the Africans, they've been robbed. The Latin Americans, etc., they've been robbed. They've been genocided. They've been attacked by the U.S. empire, but they maintained their dignity. They maintain their dignity, the dignity to fight back. They're asking questions. The Africans are now saying, why is it that we got all of these natural resources and we're broke? It's a rhetorical question. When Ibrahim Traore, the leader of Burkina Faso, asked that question, why is it we got all these natural resources, all of this wealth, and we're going around the world begging for money? He asked it rhetorically because everybody knows the answer, because they've been robbed. They are a robbery victim. They have had a gun placed to the back of their heads, and they have been robbed by the thieves, the ruling elite, because you don't get any of it. The working class, you're seeing more and more. You don't get any of it because they're doing the same thing to you. They've turned that beast that goes around the world, robbing everybody and sucking up everybody's resources, and now they turned it inward. And now they're doing the same thing to the people of Europe and the people of the United States. But the Africans are impoverished. The Latin Americans have been impoverished, but they maintained their dignity. They fought back. What about the Muslims? They maintained their dignity. They fought back. They are fighting back even when some of their own leaders may be controlled by the empire. Some of their leaders may not be acting in their best interest, but the people are standing up and fighting back, willing to give their lives to fight back for their dignity. They're ready to die rather than lose their dignity. And what are the people of Europe doing? Some of them are starting to wake up. Some of them are starting to say, okay, hey, this ain't working for me. Good. But you still got a lot of them running around with a blue and yellow flag, unwilling to face the reality that they have been robbed of their jobs. They've been robbed of their culture. They've been robbed of their dignity. They've been robbed of everything. Let me talk about immigration for 1 second and add this to that. The big lie that Europeans are just a bunch of racists and they've got problems with that. Look, here's the reality. The reality is the ruling elite. I'm not saying there aren't racists. There's racists in anywhere or not racist, whatever. This is not about that discussion. This is about the overall discussion, same here with the U.S. The ruling elite go to another country. They destabilize that country. They steal the resources from that country and they bring them back here. And now the people here are living off of the resources from this country. Now what happens? The people in this country follow their resources back. Their resources that they should be getting rich off of have come back to the United States from Guatemala and places like that. And the Guatemalans say, well, damn it, I'm following my resources. You guys are living pretty rich off of my damn bananas and my coffee and my cacao and my lithium and my gold mines and my blah, 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 blah. I'm following my resources back to where the people that stole it. You ever watch a movie? And in the movie, there's like a tribe or something. And there's a great movie called Ong Bak, and but like the Ong Bak 2 or whatever, and it's the kind of thing, you know, the people steal something from a village, and somebody from that village goes and says, I'm going to get our Buddha and bring it back to our village. It's bad luck. It's been stolen. Things aren't going to work for us, right? You steal something, somebody goes back to get it. That's all it is. The ruling elite robbed these people and they brought their stuff here, and the people are following their money, their stuff back now. So they are victims of theft. And the ruling elite look at it and say, look, come to think of it, if these people get here, we could use their asses. We can use them for cheap labor. We can use them to drive down the cost of labor. We can use them for replacement labor, a whole bunch of poor people. And you guys will get pissed at them, not us, for bringing them over here. We win twice. We destabilize you. You blame them. Meanwhile, if you bring 1 million people from another culture, they bring that culture here, and you got a culture. There's nothing wrong with people being proud of their culture and liking their culture. Now, if I were Europe, if I were the Europeans, if I was the working class in Europeans in Europe, I would recognize that my culture does not align with the ruling elite of my country, and I would boot their asses out. But I wouldn't be angry. They did it, and they want you to be angry at these people who brought another culture to your culture. Your culture ain't what it is anymore. Right now, I'm in Anne Arundel County, which is outside of Baltimore. As people in Baltimore got more money and they grew up and generations got a better job, a lot of them moved out of Baltimore into Anne Arundel County. There's a lot more Baltimoreans in Anne Arundel County. The demographics in the county that I live in have changed dramatically as younger people in Baltimore got more education, got better jobs. They moved out into the county where you live better. There's less crime and there's less problems, and you got a nicer homes and all that, right? That's neutral. That changes some things in Anne Arundel County. That's reality. And look, people have always been nomadic. People move around. That's a reality. We had something in the United States called the Great Migration from 1910 to the 1970s. What was that? A lot of Black people who were like sharecroppers, totally impoverished, living in an unthinkably racist apartheid South, like Mississippi, where they literally got hung. So get the hell out of here. And they went to the coast, and they went to Detroit, where there was jobs, and they went to the coast and blah, blah, changed the demographics. That's the reality of humankind. You can look at like people in different countries and say, well, the Moors were occupied this country for 500 years. They mixed up. That's why these people are a little more olive. And this is the history of mankind. What I'm saying with the immigration here as part of this whole discussion of Europe is the Europeans have been had by the ruling elite, and they want to blame the immigrants, number one. And number two, and here's where I really feel what's so pathetic about I got to throw this out here before we move forward. So you got these people in Europe and in the United States who are upset and frustrated about the ruling elite, about immigration. Darn it all, immigration, it's a labor issue. It's a cultural issue. It's all of these, which are valid discussions. Doesn't make you evil because you have that discussion. I believe in discussing anything, but they then think they're going to go to the government and fix it. Hey,
A convoy of Ukrainian troops at their defense base, being hit by fire from Russian army artillery ammunition during combat action on June 14, 2024. Smoke billows due a fire, which burned and spread at several points at an important enemy base near Kizimys across the Dnieper River in Kherson region. Not expecting the massive attack that suddenly came, most of the surviving enemy personnel rushed to save their precious lives from being surrounded by artillery, the Russian god of war on land. The discovery of the attack on one of the Kiev bases, the data of coordinator of the Nikolaev underground agent, Sergei Lebedev, helped provide detailed intelligence information, allowing Russian soldiers to take the actions deemed necessary in the operation. In addition to the Ukrainian troops convoy, Russian soldiers destroyed PZH-2000 self-propelled artillery and several of another NATO heavy equipment. This time, a German PZH-2000 in the vicinity of a base, to replace howitzers in Ukrainian service destroyed or obsolete in the war against Russia, was apparently hit by an FPV drone. Meanwhile, Russian artillery fire followed there, destroying the crew at the firing position of the PZH-2000, citing the dialogue involved in the destruction of the cannon. On Kherson direction, the artillery troops of the Dnipro group of forces continuously poured endless shells on the Ukrainian positions. Ukrainian troops concentrated across the river too close to Russia, as if they were not at war. Their command posts and hardware continued to be destroyed. According to experts, the Kiev-NATO proxy war seems clearly difficult to win.
Revolutionary salute. I appreciate the love, family.
Even though there are still no major changes in the theater of military operations in Ukraine, Russian troops continue to advance slowly in all directions of the front. According to war correspondents from both sides, the armed forces of Ukraine are on the defensive even in those sectors of the front, where a sufficiently large number of Ukrainian army personnel is still being recorded. At the same time, war correspondents note that the Ukrainian army, even despite numerous failures on the battlefield, is trying to carry out counterattacks in some areas of the front. In general, watching the articles of Ukrainian Telegram channels and military experts, one can notice a lack of optimism and also a statement of the fact that the armed forces of Ukraine continue to retreat, even though NATO countries supply all types of weapons to Ukraine almost in non-stop mode. The mood of Ukrainian Telegram channels and military experts was also spoiled by today's official statement by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. In particular, the Russian Defense Ministry officially confirmed that Russian troops had liberated the strategically important settlement of Zagornoye, in the Zaporizhia direction of the front. In addition, the head of the press center of the grouping of troops under the designation Vostok, Lieutenant Colonel of the Russian Army, Oleg Chekhov, also officially stated that over the past 24 hours, in all directions of the front, the armed forces of Ukraine lost 1,500 soldiers, 2 tanks, 3 infantry fighting vehicles, 2 multiple launch rocket systems, 5 Nota electronic warfare systems, and 20 artillery systems, including Polish Krab self-propelled guns. In addition, Russian troops also continue to advance in the South Donetsk direction of the front. It is reported that as of June 17, 2024, the Russian army completely took control of the area tightly adjacent to the village of Vodyanoy. In addition, offensive units of Russian troops are also fighting on the eastern approaches of the Stroydel plant, near the coal mine named Sergei. Commenting on the situation in the South Donetsk direction, Ukrainian Telegram channels and experts called on the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Sersky, to dislodge Russian troops from this section of the front as soon as possible, since the battalion of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine found itself in a real encirclement, in the area of the settlement of Vladimirovka, east of Volodar. This information was also confirmed by the official representative of the 105th Regiment of the People's Militia of the DPR. According to him, the Ukrainian troops were indeed surrounded near the village of Vladimirovka. Moreover, he also confirmed that Russian troops took under fire control all the supply routes of the armed forces of Ukraine in this sector of the front. At the same time, it is worth noting that war correspondents recognize that the Ukrainian troops, who were surrounded near the village of Vladimirovka, will very likely be captured or destroyed by artillery fire. According to them, General Sersky perfectly understands the seriousness of the situation, but at the same time, he is not in a position to change anything, since there are practically no reserves left at his disposal. In general, war correspondents note that Ukrainian troops began to allow themselves to be encircled very often in certain sectors of the front. However, this time, near the settlement of Vladimirovka, a fairly large military unit of the armed forces of Ukraine was surrounded. And this fact became an alarming sign for the Ukrainian General Staff and the Kiev regime.
Loss after loss. See, the only group don't surrender is the Nazis. That's why they came out and backed the Azov Battalion, because the rest of the army just want to surrender and go home. The Nazis want to fight the Russians.
Moreover, even the Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Ivan Gavrilyuk, began to make excuses to American journalists from The Washington Post for the fact that Ukrainian troops began to be surrounded too often. According to him, the armed forces of Ukraine are surrounded in certain sectors of the front only because the Russian army significantly outnumbers the Ukrainian troops in manpower. Ivan Gavrilyuk also warned the American journalists that soon the Ukrainian army would retreat along the entire combat contact line, and that this retreat was allegedly a new military strategy that would allow the armed forces of Ukraine to gain time and hold the front in the most strategically important areas. At the same time, it is worth noting that this statement by the Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine caused a negative reaction from Ukrainian military experts and analysts. They remind him that if the Ukrainian army retreats from Pokrovsk and Korokhov, the armed forces of Ukraine would have to build new defensive positions along the Dnieper River. Against this backdrop, many experts urged the Ukrainian authorities to accept Vladimir Putin's peace initiatives, in order not to lose even more territories, including Odessa and Nikolaev regions. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially announced the destruction of the next American multiple-launch rocket systems. In particular, we are talking about the M142 MRs and M270 MLRS. Unfortunately, as always, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation did not provide details of this operation. However, sources in the Russian military department stated that these American multiple-launch rocket systems were destroyed by the troops of the Dnieper grouping, in the Kakhovsky direction of the front, near the settlement of Dobraya Nadia. Moreover, representatives of the Russian military department also confirmed that along with these multiple-launch rocket systems, 5 U.S. Army officers, who directly controlled these missile complexes, were also destroyed. Meanwhile, retired Lieutenant Colonel of the Luhansk People's Republic, Andrei Marachko, said that on the night of June 15, the Russian army launched a successful bomb strike at the place of temporary deployment of units of the Ukrainian army and foreign mercenaries, in the Kharkiv region. According to him, on the eve, the Russian command received information from its confidential informants that in the village of Bogayevka, southeast of Kharkiv, there is a secret place of temporary deployment of units of the Ukrainian army and foreign mercenaries. After that, a reconnaissance drone was sent to the area. A few minutes later, the drone confirmed the words of the informants. And just a couple of minutes later, a crushing blow was struck at this place with the help of guided aerial bombs of the Fab family. It is reported that as a result of this strike, about 60 Ukrainian soldiers and about 30 foreign mercenaries were killed. They were mostly citizens of France, Georgia, Poland, and the United States.
Now, I started to lead with this humiliation for the U.S. because they are getting humiliated, them in Britain, by the Houthi rebels. But I want to go into some of what the U.S. hooking back up with the Nazis because they just can't stand Putin. Like World War II, they can't stand Russia, so they're willing to deal with any army to defeat the Russians. But the humiliation of what happened to the U.S. and NATO in the Red Sea will never be forgotten. 1,000 years now, they're going to talk about how the poorest Arab nation in the Middle East humiliating the most powerful nation on earth. That's a lie.
Houthis sink another ship in the Gulf of Aden.
U.S. can't protect them. Nobody.
Tactical success in the fall of Verbena. Yahya Sari confirms the major victory for rebels. Yemen's armed forces have announced successful attack against 2 commercial ships in the Gulf of Aden, citing violations of the country's ban on using its water to travel to the ports in the occupied Palestinian territories. According to the Brigadier General Yahya Sari, the spokesperson of the Houthi rebels, also known as the Yemeni Armed Forces, one ship named Verbena has been sunk after being targeted by multiple missiles. Furthermore, another vessel, the Tutor, was struck by a naval drone and several ballistic missiles and drones, leaving it at risk of sinking in the coming hours. These attacks are a part of an escalating maritime campaign by the Houthi group, which controls Yemen's armed forces to enforce a ban on ships traveling to Israeli ports. The ban was imposed on 7th of October when the Israeli government launched a military offensive on the Gaza Strip, which, as per the Gaza's health ministry, have claimed the life of at least 38,000 people and left over 90,000 people injured. Sari retaliated that the armed forces warning to all companies dealing with Israel or allowing their ships to arrive at the alleged Palestinian territories, stating that they will be targeted with the operational range of the Yemeni forces. This is the second and actually a first success attack after the Rubimar by the Houthis against commercial vessels in the region. The previous incident occurred on Thursday when the rebels fired 2 anti-ship cruise missiles striking MV Verbena again, a Ukrainian-owned and Polish-operated cargo vessel carrying wood from Malaysia to Italy. This attack had left the Verbena ablaze, and 1 crew member was also severely injured, requiring medical assistance and evacuation by the US helicopter. The US CENTCOM had also confirmed the attack on Verbena and had stated that the crew is actively fighting the fire on board the ship. The UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre had also issued an alert about a vessel being attacked and catching fire, prompting a distress call from the Verbena. In response to the Houthi aggression, the CENTCOM has also stated that it had destroyed a drone boat and 2 patrol boats in the Red Sea and an airborne drone too. Yet, the Houthis have succeeded in successfully drowning off the Verbena. The Houthi campaign against commercial shipping in the region is directly linked to the ongoing war between Israel and Gaza. The rebels have claimed the responsibility for all the attacks, framing them as retaliation against Israeli military actions in Gaza and the ongoing blockade of the Palestinian territory. Now, as the tensions escalate in the region, the risk of commercial shipping and international trade routes in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden remain high, prompting concern from maritime authorities and potential repercussions for the global supply chains.
All the humiliation. They can't stop the Houthi rebels. Oh, excuse me, y'all. They cannot stop the Houthi rebels. They begged Iran to stop them. Iran said, oh, hell no. Especially not after our president was murdered. Now you piss Putin off. So Putin then decide to make sure they can hit your warships. Iran then decided to make sure they humiliate Britain and the U.S.
Because we haven't talked about them for a while, but meanwhile, Houthi action is ongoing with regard to attacking ships in the shipping lanes to try to put pressure in order to hopefully eventually end Israel's onslaught onto Gaza, which doesn't seem to be moving in the right direction. News Nation actually did an interesting report talking about how significant a threat they've been, how effective they've been, as well as take a listen to what they found.
The message from the United States Navy is clear. The whole world is underestimating these Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. They say that they are capable, they are
Not no Iran-backed. No. That's not how this works. We never say Israel, the U.S.-backed Israel, or the U.S.-backed Ukraine. No. Iran back. They tried to throw people's mind off. Well, they must be evil. No, they revolutionary freedom fighters who said they won't stand for genocide. And they wasn't even messing with the U.S. They just said Israel. Here come the U.S. trying to be a bully, act all big and bad. We're going to stop. And the rain haven't stopped. The pain haven't stopped. And they done wasted a lot of our taxpayer dollars trying to stop these cheap drones and boats. We're spending millions of dollars.
armed. And what is currently happening in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden is unprecedented and unlike anything they've seen before. How legitimate are their capabilities?
Yeah, I think people undersell the Houthis' capability. This anti-ship ballistic missile is a game changer.
They're a legitimate terrorist organization, and they conduct attacks almost daily out here.
The Houthis have captured a ship, they have sunk a ship, they've also killed 3 sailors here in this region.
They've got a lot of advanced weaponry that they've purchased or been delivered from their friends in Iran, and they have no problem using it.
I think our objective is to save lives, to put it very simply.
So we just saw what's behind this door, which is the Combat Information Center. From the second that one of those missiles is fired at this ship, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. How to intercept, where to intercept, what kind of tools to be used. All of those decisions, in some cases, have to be made in a matter of seconds. You know that there are very legitimate adversaries that are on the ground. What goes through your mind?
I'd try to pretty much just think about the mission itself. Launching into the pitch black of night at like 2 a.m., going in there knowing that we were the tip of the spear in the case.
You have nearly 5,000 souls aboard here. What keeps you up at night?
I'll tell you this. I keep the Houthis up at night.
So appreciate News Nation doing that report because here we are in, an ongoing multi-month long hot war effectively with the Houthis, and it gets very little coverage and it does pose, grave risk to our service members and also comes at a great cost. We tried to look for how much we've spent on this, and we have some dated numbers here, which tells you how much interest most of the press has taken in this. You can put this up on the screen. This is from back in April. We had already spent $1 billion in munitions, by the way, not even counting, the cost of this mobilization, countering the Houthi attacks. So, yet another source of money, of risk, of potential escalation that all stems from our inability to exert any influence. I shouldn't say inability, our unwillingness to exert any influence vis-a-vis Israel.
Yes, it also, that's $1 billion just in munitions. There's actually appropriated 2.4 extra billion just to cover the cost of replacing munitions. One issue I have with this is that just seems like you can snap your fingers and these munitions can just be replaced. This is extremely valuable technology, which we are learning in the Ukraine conflict takes years to reproduce as a result of the dead industrial base here in the United States. So every time that we are firing a missile, basically on behalf of the Israelis, we are taking one away from ourselves that could be used in a conflict which is actually relevant to our interests. So it's over $1 billion By the way, the cost is approximately $1.5 million per day to run the USS Eisenhower, approximately. So just do the math. It's been out there for what, couple hundred days? That's couple $100 million. You got to pay and think about all the maintenance costs. And you got to think about the opportunity cost too of its deployment versus maybe somewhere else. You can see here we're basically paying for this entire aircraft carrier, which is designed to protect U.S. commerce on the high seas, to protect another nation as it carries out another war. Americans should ask questions about that. Is that worth it? Do you think that it's worth paying for that? Do you think it's worth putting people in the position where they could potentially be hit by an anti-ship missile if your son or daughter works or is an enlisted member of the U.S. Navy? I would say no. I don't think that's worth it at all. But nobody ever gets to have this conversation. Like you said, the press, News Nation, good for them. They at least went out there. What else do you notice about the News Nation interview too? There's a high level of concern by the dudes on those ship and the women as well. They're like, this is not gone away. They're like, we're in this shit every single day and it's not good. And sure, we've won so far, but they only need to win once for it to be a major asymmetric victory. Just don't forget about that. Props to them, and they're being put in a tough position. But that's my thing, is that the policy leaders here in Washington don't ask any questions about this. They just assume it's fine, blank check. Let's not even think about what it looks like. And then if something bad happens in the future, maybe we could talk about it then.
I mean, it just is such a representation of how we are this, floundering, overextended empire led by a feeble old man who is bumbling from one self-made crisis of weakness to another. And, meanwhile, it's not only the political leaders that don't really seem to ask any questions, with very few exceptions. It's also, in fact, they just further this direction. They embrace it wholeheartedly. It's also the press that, this is a rare report that we've seen on what is even going on here at this point. So, that serves to help keep the public in the dark. And nonetheless, in spite of those efforts, you still see the public very unhappy with the direction of our unconditional support of Israel. Certainly Biden's base, as we covered before, having a lot of issues with the direction, and an overall sentiment of there's always money for more munitions to bomb the Houthis and protect Israel. There's always money to ship to Ukraine. And there's never any interest in actually delivering for us here at home. At the same time, as I was mentioning, the lawmakers who are just, totally invested in this direction, with only a few very notable and, brave dissenters at this point, we have yet another push for some sort of codifying anti-Semitism censorship bill. This one coming directly from Hakeem Jeffries, who, of course, the leader of the Democrats in the House. He's calling for passage of the, quote, Countering Anti-Semitism Act. And Michael Tracy, who does such a great job of digging into these bills and highlighting what they mean, he says this bill would create a new national coordinator to counter anti-Semitism within the executive office of the president to, among other things, quote, counter the spread of anti-Semitism online, i.e., he says, government coerced censorship, including to impose, and this is the language from the bill, accountability for individuals. So Hakeem Jeffries, who I'm sure has probably blanket support among the Republicans in the House as well, and overwhelming majority support from the Democrats, looking to once again take further steps to directly codify censorship when it comes to their definition of quote unquote anti-Semitism. And we already know, Sagar, because we've covered the definition that they're using here, it effectively bans criticism of the Israeli government and smears those who would be critical as being anti-Semites.
Yeah, scary stuff, very scary, especially whenever
The Al-Qassam Brigade offensive launched on Saturday, as Eid al-Adha is coming on June 25th. marked one of the deadliest days for the Israeli troops in recent months in Gaza, as ground invasions continued to escalate. One of several Thai operations that day, Al-Qassam broadcast scenes targeting the occupation base and troops stationed in the Netzarim corridor. The corridor, which divides Gaza Strip, opens into the Mediterranean oil basin, which Israel claims as a buffer zone between North and South Gaza. Ironically, the American docks were there, and several warships were docked there. The fighters sent greetings to the congregation on the day of Arafat, while installing fuel and cables, and setting the Rajam rocket launch controller. A salvo of 114mm rockets made by Al-Qassam then bombed the concentration of occupation troops in the corridor. On the morning of the first day of Eid al-Adha, viral sources on social media showed scenes of Israeli troops towing the NIMR armored vehicle after it was blown up by Al-Qassam Brigade in Rafah in the south of Gaza Strip. Al-Qassam's unprecedented deadly ambush in Tal es-Sultan district resulted in the death of the vehicle convoy crew, consisting of 8 soldiers, and the wounding of an unknown number of soldiers. During the ambush, Al-Qassam fired a rocket-propelled grenade RPG at their enemy's D-9 military bulldozer. A rescue force vehicle that later arrived was also attacked, resulting in the destruction and death of all its occupants. Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari said an investigation into this incident would be carried out to find out how the attack could have occurred.
Las Vegas and Davenport, Iowa. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. Dan Cohen is here. He's going to give us the 411 on what's happening in Haiti. Dan is an independent journalist and filmmaker based in D.C. He's reported from Israel, Palestine, Latin America, U.S.-Mexican border for places like Mondoweiss, The Nation, Alternate, Gray Zone, Al Jazeera, English, Vice News. He currently operates his own journalistic outlet called Uncaptured Media, and his latest documentary is called Haiti, Intervention versus Revolution. All right, Dan, great to see you, buddy. So I'm going to play this video. Do you want to set it up, or should I just play it?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the clip that I sent you. Oh, yes. Okay, so this is what you're going to see is a guy named Jimmy Cherizier, alias Barbecue, who, if you were on Twitter X a few months ago, you may remember he was the subject of a bunch of allegations about cannibalism in Haiti.
Yes.
They were saying he's like the leader of a cannibal gang in Haiti, which is totally false.
So when I saw that, yeah, my spidey senses went up. It's like, okay, so they're trying to obviously smear this guy, so he must be going against the United States regime somehow, right?
Exactly. He's basically the leading anti-imperialist figure in Haiti, which says a lot. And so what he has tried to do over the years is take these different armed groups in various impoverished neighborhoods of Port-au-Prince, of Haiti's capital, and that had been fighting for years. Some of them criminals and some of them anti-crime. He's always been an anti-crime guy. And he's basically tried to unite them to say, let's stop fighting against each other and let's turn our weapons against the oligarchs who are keeping us down, who are paying us to kill each other. And so our documentary that I made with Kim Ives of Haiti Liberté called Another Vision, it's a 3-part series, which, we've talked about it on the show before. It documents that process up through 2021. And then this latest episode, he finally succeeds in uniting a number of the armed groups. So what you're going to see here is he sits down with one of his former rivals, a guy who he fought a lot with, and they talk about how they're going to fight against a foreign invasion.
Okay, let's play it.
Y a fait même Jean-Ministre te fait en 2004, violer petits garçons, Jean soldat uruguayen te fait, violer petits filles, violer femmes. Y a fait même Jean Népalais yo pote choléra pour nous, côté 20 000 haïtiens mourir dans choléra, plus passer 500 000 l'autre infectés. L'ONU connaît ça yo. L'ONU mène bon enquête, il connaît que c'est Népalais yo et qui quitté pote choléra. Qui ça yo fait? Yo pas jamais dédommager nous et yo refuse de reconnaître que c'est yo qui te pote maladie en Haïti. Et si
So he's saying that the UN brought cholera to Haiti, which killed 20,000 Haitians.
How? Like they did put it in the water, or they just were infected with it?
Was that intentional, or what was that?
No, it wasn't intentional. Basically, they defecated their sewage from these UN blue helmet, so-called peacekeepers, back in the early days of the UN occupation, following the 2004 U.S. orchestrated coup against Haiti's president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. These Nepalese troops leaked sewage into a prominent river, and it got a lot of people sick and killed them. So basically, cholera happens when you get sewage in the water, and that's been a condition that has existed since then.
Okay. So he says if the foreign troops came to get rid of Ariel Henry, we would be happy. Who's Ariel Henry?
So Ariel Henry is the former de facto prime minister. He was, after the president, the elected president was assassinated in July 2021. The U.S. just put in just basically anointed this guy Ariel Henry to be the prime minister, and he was the de facto prime minister. So we filmed this last August, and at that point, the whole country wanted to get rid of Ariel Henry. They were leading the fight against him, against this U.S. puppet. Finally, in February of this year, February 28th, 29th, it was a leap year, they succeeded in getting rid of him. So now there's a new group in. So this is, it's slightly aged, but the point stands about, what he's saying about foreign intervention.
Okay. So this guy, this Jimmy Barbecue, he's leading a coalition of militias inside Haiti against the United States installed puppets, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And the oligarchs in Haiti.
Exactly. And he's open, he's repeatedly said, let's have dialogue, but all the oligarchs, they now have this thing called a presidential transitional council, which is just a multi-headed hydra of puppets that the US has installed. That's totally unelected and selected a president. Nobody voted for it. They refused to talk to him. So when there's no dialogue in politics, that's when it turns to the other form of politics, which is weapons.
Right. As Fred Hampton said, politics is war without weapons. War is politics with weapons. Right. Okay. Here we go. We would be happy. If the forces were coming to establish security to allow the people to move about, we would be happy. If the foreign forces are coming to consolidate the power of the oligarchs, the 5% of the people who control 85% of the country's wealth, the foreign forces are coming to consolidate Ariel Henry because they know that. Hang on, I got to back that up.
Sounds like America the way he's talking.
Yeah,
5% control 85%. Foreign forces coming in, and
because they know that that he participated in the assassination of, how do you say his name?
Jovenel Moise.
So that was the last president that was democratically elected. He got assassinated in 2021, and they know that he participated. Who's he?
Ariel Henry. The the prime minister that the U.S. anointed right after his assassination was a leading suspect in the assassination.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like LBJ.
Yeah. So here we go. And the only way for him to avoid being arrested and facing justice is to have the foreign forces come so they can have a phony election so he can select someone that he wants and he doesn't have to face justice. So they're talking about Ariel and Henry, right? I like to call him Henry.
Ariel Henry, I say.
I call him Ariel Henry. That's why in the popular neighborhoods, Toto represents Bel Air. What does that mean?
That guy's nickname is Toto.
Oh, okay.
The other guy there, and Bel Air is the next neighborhood over from Barbecue's neighborhood of it's called Lower Delma is where.
Okay,
he
so
lives.
Toto, so this guy next to him represents Bel Air, which I'm going to guess is not like the Bel Air here in California.
Right.
He says I represent the revolutionary forces in the G9. Okay. And today there is no G9 and no GPEP. What does that mean?
Okay, so the G9 was formed in 2020 by Cherizier and several other armed leaders from different neighborhoods to fight against crime. They said, look, no more kidnapping, no more robbery, no more extortion, no more rape in our neighborhoods. We want to get rid of the criminals. So they pushed the criminals out of their neighborhoods and united to call this thing the G9. And they also provided they have like clean water and food, and they have a social aspect to what they do. As soon as that was announced, the oligarchs created something called the GPEP, which means the G people. And that was like kind of like a copycat. It's like an old CIA tactic where you make like a copycat of something. Like because the Jimmy Dore show is doing so successful, so they'll have like, I don't know, the Timmy Shore show to like kind of confuse people,
I want to start the Timmy Shore show.
So the GPEP, the G people was totally criminal, and they would get paid by the oligarchs to do all kinds of dirty work, and they had a lot more money. They had more weapons and bigger weapons, and so they would just constantly be battling against the G9. And this is what we show in another vision, is that the G9 and JPEP would fight, but the whole time, Jimmy Barbecue, Cherizier, would always say, look, let's stop fighting. We're all from the same social class. We're all living in this situation together. So why are we fighting against each other? Let's actually change our reality. And so finally, he managed to do that with this agreement was part of it, this with Toto, and created what is called Vivre Ensemble. Vivre Ensemble means live together in Haitian Creole. And that is the primary armed group, that you'll read about in the New York Times or the Washington Post that's so scary. And, we have to send in these foreign mercenaries to take out.
Okay.
Well, if gangs stop fighting, they could turn on the leadership.
That's right. So that's and that's why you saw it in the press that this guy was a cannibal and that his gang is a cannibal. I knew immediately I saw that. I'm like, oh, this is Julian Assange is a rapist. That's what that is. And okay.
Their gangs called Live Together.
This is part.
That's the scariest thing there is.
Well, it is coming together along social class lines, and this is the Hamas decapitated 40 babies. That's what this is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. We are waiting for the foreign forces. I think if they're going to come and be our popular neighborhoods to shoot, massacre, and rape people, if they think they're going to come, and then we in the popular neighborhoods who have, what is that? Dessalines?
Dessalines' blood. Jean-Jacques Dessalines was the founding father of Haiti. He is the preeminent Haitian revolutionary who.
So he's warning that the foreign forces. Now the foreign forces is the United States, right? The CIA, and whoever they decide to pay, right?
Exactly. They've paid hundreds of millions of dollars to Kenya, of all countries, to basically lead like a blackface invasion, because it's even, I've been saying this for 2 years. As soon as they started announcing that they're looking for another country to be the face of this invasion, I was like, it's obvious. Why? Because Haitians they're very sensitive to foreign intervention, especially from the United States, because the US has repeatedly occupied them, robbed their gold reserves, has treated them horribly, has couped them twice. So the US, the Biden administration wants to do it in like a woke way. They're like, we're going to get, some Africans or whoever else to do it. And so they got Kenyans, and Kenya has like the most atrocious. They got Kenyan
That's gonna be
police
extra brutal.
paramilitaries. Oh, they have like the worst humanitarian record. The UN documented their use of death squads in the police, where they disappeared thousands of people, and even the police who came out of that death squad and blew the whistle, those guys got disappeared. So that's who they want to send to Haiti to kill these so-called gangs, is they want to send like real death squads.
Holy shit. So he's saying we will stand and fight until our last drop of blood.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. Is there more to this? Let's see.
I think that's it.
So that's it. So that's what's going on in Haiti. So what? So now this. So. So what does the UN have to say about? Doesn't the UN, aren't they hip to? Oh, the CIA's paying Kenyans, and then Kenyans, are they there yet? Did the Kenyans come to Haiti yet?
Well, there's been all kinds of delays. So the Kenyan president, William Ruto, who is basically kind of like he wants to be like a Zelensky. He came here last month, late in May, and met with Biden. And it was, the first visit from an African head of state in many years, which shows kind of how the U.S. even treats its African puppets. And on that day, it was supposed to be these Kenyan police would deploy to Haiti, but there's all kinds of holdups because there's actually resistance in Kenya from people who oppose this, from lawmakers. So it's not a done deal, and it's the whole thing. The main issue is you need what's called a bilateral agreement. So Ariel Henry, when he was still the de facto prime minister, in late February, he flew to Kenya to go sign a bilateral agreement, to sign an agreement with Kenya to have the forces invade. While he was gone, Barbecue and Vivon Sam went and attacked the airport and like key installations. So then Ariel Henry could not get back into the country. That forced him to basically resign, and the U.S. scrambled to cobble something together. Like, we need some new puppets in there because this one has expired. And so that allowed the Kenyan opposition to basically say, look, you don't even have a functioning government. How can you sign something with them when there's no one there? So that was one delay. There's also delays, like the Kenyans said that
so the way this works is, so the United States installs a puppet in Haiti, and then it has to get that puppet that it installs to go make a deal with Kenya to import their death squads under the guise of, probably bringing security to the country, right? And so that's how Kenyans can show up there in Haiti under the guise of, oh no, we're invited.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's just a big farce. But then another hang up they ran into is they said, like, well, you can participate in this as a Kenyan cop if you've had less than 3 criminal convictions. And so they've only got like 200 or 300 cops. I mean, it's just a total disaster for them already. And really, to me, it shows actually just the impotence of the empire. I mean, you'd think that, the U.S. could just send in, whatever proxy or
would think,
to just do the dirty job and it would be over. But if you look at it in the broader context of how the U.S. is failing in Ukraine, is failing in Gaza, killing a ton of people, yes, making lots of money for the military-industrial complex, yes, but overall not achieving their goals at all. And Haiti is just, a smaller kind of area on the grand chessboard. And, they seem to be failing. What I do wonder is if, say, Trump wins, this is it's like it would be a perfect kind of thing for Trump's advisors to say, this would be an easy one. Just send some troops in, get this crazy cannibal African, Haitian guy, kind of like they did with Venezuela and saying like,
right,
oh, if you just support this Juan Guaido guy, then that'll be an easy one. We'll take out some socialists and that'll be it. So it's this kind of like drawn out saga that just gets dumber and dumber. But the more that the U.S. kind of bears down on Haiti, the more that the people, these armed groups, unite, which is not an easy task. I mean, Barbecue's been working to unite these groups for years and years, and it's an ongoing thing.
Can I ask a question? What made the other group, CPEP? Is that what they're called?
GPEP, yeah.
What made them? Did they realize they were like a construct of the CIA, and like how did they come together?
Well, they came together originally with money from really dirty oligarchs who are tied to the U.S. Eventually, they got to a point where they had their own money, they had their own weapons. They didn't really need payments from these guys, from these oligarchs, and Barbecue's message started to resonate more with them because he said, basically, like, look at the condition we're living in. We live among piles of burning trash. Our people are being killed. Like, this is terrible. Why do we, we're proud Haitians. We had the 1804 revolution. We defeated 3 empires. Like, let's let's respect our history and our tradition and our culture. The other thing is actually the second clip that we have shows quite well. There was the involvement of an American Catholic priest who, if we can play that clip, you'll see he actually played a key role. Okay.
What the people really need now is food. Yo besoin manger.
Yeah.
Oh, is that Jimmy Carter?
Yeah. That's Father Tom Hagen. He is a very dedicated missionary in Haiti who has dedicated his life to building schools and actually, I mean, the NGOs and a lot of the missionaries are frankly terrible and are agents of empire. But Father Tom Hagen, I think, is very much an exception to the rule. And yes, in terms of Barbecue being a Freemason, a lot of people ask about this, so finally I get to address it. Yes, Barbecue is a Freemason. It's different, I would say, in the Haitian context than the huge Freemason temple here in DC, where it's in kind of an elite kind of cult. In Haiti, people are very superstitious. A lot of people are Freemasons. A lot of even Haitian, American Haitians in diaspora, many of them are Freemasons. And it's more, it's also kind of merged with voodoo, the religion, the African religion that was brought to Haiti. So it's more just kind of, it's not as meaningful than, if you saw, like George Bush or somebody being
it's weird because they're Catholics, aren't they mostly there? Like, I thought the church is like, you can't be a Freemason. I don't know. Everybody's got their own thing, I guess.
All right, let's play this.
To get food for them.
I think so. One of the key figures involved in both the peace accord and the community projects is Father Tom Hagen of Hands Together, an NGO that builds schools across the country.
My role wasn't that much. It was just kind of like a suggestion, because we've had a couple kind of truce before, and but interesting, not many people have even come to say, hey, this is a good thing. Nothing at all. And I wonder sometimes if it's just have a suspicion that maybe the people want these gangs to be called bad people or bad gangs because they use them for different reasons, political reasons, whatever else. But I'm willing to stand up and say, hey, there's goodness in them. And I bet my life on this guy. He's a good person.
Okay.
Well, he's not going to make it to the inner Freemason circle with that good attitude. I'll tell you that.
So he's basically, I mean, does this guy have any power?
No, he doesn't have any power, but what he does is, for one thing, so that's in Barbecue's neighborhood, Lower Delma, where they are building, you can see they had construction going on and now it's complete. They built a number of schools, they built shelters, they built a restaurant, they have a swimming pool for kids, and it's all community projects trying to improve the situation where the state has failed. I mean, decades and decades of U.S. neoliberalism has totally gutted the state. There's no social services. Nobody collects the garbage, for example. So those kinds of things are what Cherizier has organized his neighborhood to do. And with the help of this guy, Father Tom Hagen, who is a neutral figure, he can talk to different. It's easier for him to talk to different armed leaders and say, "Hey, why don't you guys sit down and talk?" So he played a role, not a major role, but he played a role in this, and it's a kind of different side. I mean, most Haiti so-called experts are afraid to talk about this stuff. They will not talk about. It's kind of
People think
in
it's
a
a
way.
conspiracy. People think you're talking about a conspiracy. And I have friends say that to me, not even like to me, like, "Oh, you're conspiracy." I'm like, "This ain't about UFOs, dude. This is land news. This is normal world news. It's not a conspiracy. It's just the news."
Well, I think with Cherizier and Vivant Sam, it's really easy. There's sort of a hegemony in the media where everyone, from the New York Times to kind of left-wing media, says barbecue is bad. He carried out these massacres, and they'll just repeat this ad nauseum. And it's I've debunked thoroughly the claims about massacres that he allegedly carried out. We did that in our documentary Another Vision. We have an entire episode dedicated to it. But people are afraid, because no one else is doing it, people are afraid to challenge that narrative. So most people who go on, whether it's CNN or alternative media, and talk about Haiti, they just say they're gangs, they're bad,
Yeah, right.
they
You
kill
just write them
people.
off.
Yeah, or they just they make the focus. These are paramilitaries. These guys are really bad. But the fact is, the so-called gangs, I think, are the most authentic representation of the impoverished neighborhoods, the masses of Port-au-Prince in particular that exist, warts and all. That's not to say that they're angels, but it's the condition that Haiti and really Port-au-Prince is in. So the two options basically are, well, we can just say, yeah, let's let the U.S. proxy force go in and support that, and they'll just kill a bunch of people and we'll have another decade-long occupation. Or we can say this is a good process where groups that were fighting, and some of whom have committed very heinous crimes, Cherizier not being one of them, but they put down their weapons, they unite and create their own path. Like Haitians actually improve their condition.
But that could destroy the whole prison.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think's going to happen?
I think what we are seeing is a revolutionary process where, now this group, Vivant Sam, has expelled the U.S. puppet Ariel Henry. It forced the U.S. to scramble to cobble together what this Haitian presidential transitional council, which is just a bunch of puppets. They put in a bunch of just a bunch of opportunists and cynics and scoundrels, all seeking power, and they all had to swear to support this proxy force coming in, so they don't have any actual power. And then they just appointed a prime minister, Gary Coney, who was the prime minister already. He was Bill Clinton's aide following the 2010 earthquake, when Bill Clinton was the UN special envoy for Haiti.
Yeah.
And then he was appointed as prime minister when Hillary Clinton was was running the State Department. So it's just the same old political class they're trying to put in. And so now it's like, okay, these people want to be hood ornaments on the U.S. tank coming in, but so now it's, well, what is going to happen? Is the U.S. going to get this proxy force in? Is it going to fail? And then that becomes an argument for Trump to come in and say, you know what, we got to send a bunch of Marines in there. We got to just take this guy out because the Haitians are coming to our borders and they're going to, cannibalize us. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but I see a revolutionary process unfolding, and I hope it succeeds. It could fail. Anything could happen, but so far I'm sort of optimistic.
I'm impressed that Freemason is actually doing masonry. You never see that. That's why I was so suspicious. How come they don't build nothing? Here they are.
I hate to be a pessimist, but my guess is the American Marines will go in, crush them, And
they'll be busy in China or in
Taiwan.
it's closer. They're closer, so it's easier to send them to Haiti.
Well, I think we have to outsource this one.
I mean, Trump will think, just like Dan said, it's always, we got an easy victory.
They'll be busy arresting Rachel Maddow as she figures.
Yeah, let's go get a victory. That's what they're going to say. It's like Grenada with Reagan when in the 80s. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that.
We showed them 16 whatever.
We showed them. Yeah, there's like 15 guys.
We showed those Antifas.
Yeah, and so that's what it's going to look like. That's what it's going to be sold to Trump as, and that's what he'll do.
Well, it's morning in America soon.
Yeah, and
that's assuming Trump gets in, which is, who knows what they're going to do to him to prevent that.
I bet you it's going to be a Reagan times coming. It's going to be like they let all those people in, like Scarface, the Cuban, the Mario boat lift. Joey Diaz pointed out that the crime in Miami is crazy, but it built it all up, and everybody. So on a national scale, we have that here. So then Biden is not popular. I bet they're going to do a whole Reagan thing. It's going to be like a big right-wing morning in America kind of reset, the opposite of what they were promising.
Order that it sometimes I think I must be living in a nightmare. How is it possible that in 3 short years we have witnessed such a monumental shift in the global world order that it would leave the Roman Empire shocked and appalled? After all, the Roman Empire took about 200 years to finally collapse. It was a slow burn. This week, we saw a number of massive stories that were once again ignored by the mainstream media, from the BRICS nations shaking up the financial system to major geopolitical movements involving Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia. Putin calling for peace and NATO crapping all over it, saying, no, we don't want your peace. Take your peace and shove it. We want more war.
So this is not a peace proposal.
To Biden shaking hands with Zelensky, agreeing to fund Ukraine for another 10 years. 10 more years, billions of dollars, while America crumbles. Yes, we're going to send billions to the most corrupt government in Europe.
I think Zelensky is maybe the greatest salesman of any politician that's ever lived. Every time he comes to our country, he walks away with $60 billion.
The winds of change are blowing strong right now, so buckle up because we're going to dive deep into all of this tonight. So let's start with the transformative events recently announced by the BRICS nations. Now, if you're not familiar with BRICS, it started, as the name suggests, as a loose economic and trade partnership between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And now it's exploded, becoming a powerhouse, creating their very own currency away from the US dollar dominance. And countries are racing right now to join the BRICS coalition and ditch the US dollar. Well, we have 2 huge BRICS stories this week. First, BRICS announced a new payment system that directly challenges the dominance of the US dollar in international transactions. No more SWIFT system. Guys, the currency part of it is one thing, but the infrastructure to settle transactions is now out of US hands. This move marks a significant step away from the dollar-centric global economy that we've been knowing for decades. Even more shocking is the end of a 50-year agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia, which required the export of oil exclusively in US dollars.
Saudi Arabia has officially ended its 50-year petrodollar agreement with the United States, shifting to a multi-currency system.
So on June 9th, 2024, just a few days ago, this agreement officially ended. That's right. Saudi Arabia officially said bye-bye. The Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, has chosen not to renew the partnership with the United States, opting instead to open Saudi oil trade to other countries and other currencies. Hello, China. Hello, Russia. I mean, holy smokes, guys. I mean, I can't understate how big a deal this is.
And you must understand BRICS is an organization, a bloc that has openly called for de-dollarization. So having Saudi Arabia, the backbone of the petrodollar, join BRICS, I mean, you couldn't make up a bigger slap in the face. I can guarantee you they are not feeling very good right now in Washington, D.C.
This is a massive blow to the status of the US dollar as the world's only reserve currency, a position it has held for 5 decades. Now, we've been warning for months that this was about to happen, with Saudi Arabia now joining China's central bank digital currency project. We are witnessing a seismic shift in the landscape of global trade and global finance. The era of the US dollar as the sole superpower currency is officially over. This is not hyperbole. US dollar dominance is now over. Liberals can try to spin it any way they want, but you're not stupid. And none of those fawning members of the Biden press corps are going to ask the White House about it. They're too stupid to understand how big a deal this is. Last week, U.S. Congressman Thomas Massie appeared on Tucker Carlson's show with an unfiltered breakdown of what's happening to the U.S. dollar. He didn't hold back.
At some point, they're going to quit using our dollars as reserve currency. I mean, I watched your interview with Putin, and one of the things, whether you hate him or not, one of the things he said that is true is when we sanctioned him, before we sanctioned Russia, 70% of their transactions were in US dollars. And after the sanctions, it's less than 20% of their transactions are in US dollars.
As Massie points out, every time the US government introduces a new economic sanction, the world moves one step closer to de-dollarization. The same thing is happening right now with the US government's microchip battle against China. The same thing is happening with AI and electricity with China. The United States has to basically double our electricity output just to compete with China on the AI and microchip front. President Trump just admitted this.
And the electricity needs are greater than anything we've ever needed before to do AI at the highest level. And China will produce it because they'll do whatever you have to do, whereas we have environmental impact people, and we have a lot of people trying to hold us back. But massive amounts of electricity are needed in order to do AI. And we're going to have to generate a whole different level of energy.
We've fallen so far behind China, it's disgusting. Saudi Arabia is also considering full BRICS membership later this year and is expanding its oil trade to include more countries and currencies. This is a direct threat to the petrodollar system that has propped up the U.S. economy for decades. But the BRICS shockwave doesn't stop there. Something seismic happened on June 10th and the 11th at the BRICS foreign ministers meeting. 59 new countries announced plans to join BRICS. I mean, what? 59 new countries? And during the meeting, they agreed to an astonishing $78 billion in bilateral trade deals. Yes, they publicly announced plans to ditch the US dollar also at this meeting for local currencies in cross-border transactions. So they made this announcement. We're done. We're done using the US dollar. This is game over, folks. Russian President Putin laid it out this week.
One of the greatest mistakes of the United States is they're prohibiting from using dollar as in international payments and using it as a tool, and they're simply undermining the trust towards dollar. It's ridiculous. They should have taken care of the dollar and to preserve it and to raise its profile and its standing. They're simply killing it off with their own hands.
Putin knows exactly what he's doing, allowing these developing countries to start moving away from the US dollar, stop being bullied by the United States. Oh boy. President Biden's foolish sanctions against Russia have turned the world against the US dollar. And China knows exactly what's coming. That's why they've been dumping US treasuries like a bad habit.
And we're also sending a really clear signal, which is the dollar's not safe for you.
Right.
It's the reserve currency because it's a safe haven, because it's a stable country. It's the most stable country in the world, and we're not going to weaponize the dollar because that would be shooting ourselves. But suddenly we are.
This BRICS system seeks to eliminate the global dominance of the US dollar, creating a payment system using local currencies that is free from US sanctions and outside political pressure. And now that NATO has rejected Putin's peace agreement to end the war in Ukraine, we are in for a totally different world over the next few years. So guys, that's the news update part.
Cultfig, follow me.